We'll come back to order. The board has met. We have established a quorum. We would like to do Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We'll have approval of minutes. Anybody like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Have a vote?
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Deb Boyle,
Aye.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Keith Mattoon.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato,
Aye.
and Julia Beckman.
Aye, thank you.
Okay, this opens up our first reception of visitors. Would anybody like to address the board on any issues that we'll be discussing tonight? Okay. Next, we'll go to recommendations and reports of the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Pavanato. There are a lot of reports tonight. So we'll try to make those that can be brief as possible. The first report is about the 2013-2014 school calendar. And when we approve the calendar prior to the school year, we always include 5 days in the case of emergency closings. It makes sense then, when we do have an emergency closing, we use one of those 5 days and add that to the calendar. This year was historic in terms of emergency closings.
Absolutely.
And hopefully there are no more between now and the end of the year. But the administration recommends, and will recommend for the vote coming later in the action session, that we take 4 of the emergency days from the calendar, add them, reduce the calendar by 1 emergency day, and then have the last day of school be June, I believe, June 12th.
Okay.
Any questions about that?
Yep, any member?
I'm fine.
Any questions?
The kids would like to get out sooner, I know that.
Yeah.
They don't seem to be here tonight, so.
But
Okay, should we move on to one-to-one update?
Okay. We have the next 2 reports are part of the strategic plan. The first is a one-to-one update, and one-to-one essentially means some form of technology to student organization in which each student has access to his own device or her own device. And this is sort of a wave sweeping the country in education. Our way in District 99 with regard to technology implementation is to always take our time and do things meticulously. There has been a group meeting for several years now, and certainly throughout this year, to plan and also to implement a small pilot. And the group is led by Rod Rousseau and this year Gina Zaccardi, and they're going to make a report tonight along with several others to give examples to the board about where we're going. So Rod, you're on.
All right, thanks, Mark. I'll start out and recall the last time I spoke to you about this was back in December. And back in December, you heard me talk a lot about a lot of the information that we'd been gathering from our staff, from other districts, analyzing that. And so we've done a great deal of that. You also heard me talk about doing a pilot this spring, where we actually wanted to put devices in a number of students' hands, give teachers and students that true experience of what a one-to-one learning environment is actually like. The pilot is important because it's going to provide us important data about logistically how do things work, from a learning standpoint, how do these things work, that will lead us to a lot of next steps. You also have heard me talk over and over again about how this is, I'm the tech guy, but this really isn't a technology initiative, it's a learning initiative. And I'm thrilled to tell you that in tonight's presentation, there's a 3-to-1 ratio of teaching and learning people to tech people. So you won't have to hear me talk the whole time. So I'm thrilled about that. Before I turn it over to Gina, I would like to recognize our instructional technology coordinators in the buildings that have been instrumental for years getting us up to this point. Lisa Lickman from North and John Orrick from South. and also Ken Sorensen and Ed Schwartz, who have been instrumental in getting us to this point as well. So at that point, I'll turn it over to a learning person, Gina.
Thanks, Rod. So tonight we're going to talk about the pilot, and in doing so, you're going to learn from a couple of teachers as well as from students. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about why we decided to do the pilot. And there's several reasons. One, we wanted to glean valuable information and insight from teachers and students in terms of the learning benefits to our students. So we feel the pilot is very important because we can glean that information from those teachers and students. The teachers also are providing us with information about what professional development needs they have. When we do this type of an initiative, what are the needs of our teachers? What professional development will teachers need to be able to transform the way they teach so that students reap the benefits in the classroom? And also to gather logistical information, process, procedural information for us regarding the one-to-one environment. What do we need to know before we go down that path? So those are the main purposes behind this pilot. As Dr. McDonald said, when we roll things out, we investigate, we do research, we're very methodical. And in this case, we've been very strategic. We were able to get on board several teachers, and they were picked for key reasons. So we have 4 teachers from South and 4 teachers from North that their students have 24/7 access, which means they take the device home with them. We also have several classrooms that have devices in the classroom, but those students don't necessarily take them home with them. So they don't necessarily have the 24/7 access. This pilot involves approximately 200 students district-wide. We strategically picked some students that are in our interdisciplinary program at North High School. Our interdisc program, as it's called, involves social studies and English. It's both at the freshman level for English 1 and Global Connections, and at the sophomore level it would be U.S. History and English 2. Pretty wide range of students in terms of ability, from students who struggle to those students that are nearly at the honors level. So nice wide range of students. And again, it's taught in an interdisciplinary fashion. So those teachers are together, those lessons are thematic, so on and so forth. We also picked at South High School our integrated studies classes. Integrated studies is an intervention at South High. It involves at the freshman level, Global Connections, which is the social studies course, English 1, and biology. And those students are average in terms of test scores. So they fall in the range of average for the most part in terms of their test scores, but they're not necessarily performing. These are students that don't necessarily have the skills or the motivation to be successful in a traditional classroom setting. We've termed these students as demotivated students. And so we are always looking for ways to engage those students. And so for that reason, among others, it seemed like an ideal classroom for which to pilot this. So in terms of the students that we chose, they were strategically selected as well as their teachers. Because, for example, the integrated studies classes, those students have the devices for almost half their day, for 3 classes, their science, their English, and their social studies. Many of those students only have 6 classes. So for half their day, they're in classes that have the one-to-one. Also, it's important, I think, to keep in mind that even though these students go on to other classes, so they might go on to for example, math class or Spanish or a variety of other classes, they take those devices with them. So a teacher may have a small group of students in each class with devices. We also at South High piloted with some Spanish 2 classes. So to take away from just the course, because you notice I've been mentioning those core classrooms, to also an elective areas, particularly world language Spanish. So we were strategic in terms of the classes that we picked and the students. So tonight we're going to give you an opportunity through a short video to hear from several students regarding their experience as being part of the pilot. Okay, they're specifically addressing how being part of the pilot has changed their learning.
The light issue?
Thank you.
Mark was faster than I was.
The Chromebook was very useful in classes. It helped us learn. It kept us organized. Kind of a good advantage over all the kids because we could do our work like when other kids couldn't like, research, say if like you need help on a problem, you could just like, look it up.
The Chromebooks help me learn because they help me when I'm taking notes. It's a lot easier to organize my thoughts rather than just writing them down, and it's easier for the teachers to make sure that I'm on track and doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Having a Chromebook helped me by learning, like, because of like the study hall when a regular computer wasn't available. I could just use the Chromebook, like we in the lunchroom. I could just use it to like research like the questions, the answers, like in my like biology, like when we do a project, it's like easier to do that than like.
I think the Chromebook is very useful for our learning because it's like you don't have to carry around all your books and you have like all this information on your computer already. Easy communication between teachers and students at home, or if you're sick and you can be on it during class. You can research things so much more easily than having to go and pick up all this stuff, bring it back. And it's just like one thing on your desk at a time. It's pretty easy.
And it was nice to have the Chromebook specifically for my at-home Wi-Fi, so I could use it for other purposes, for other classes as well, because the Google Drive isn't just for one class, it's for all your classes throughout the day, and I think it'd be very beneficial for more of these kids to have one of their own Chromebooks.
The Chromebook helps me learn because I can search anything I want. I have Google, I have everything I need to find out any information I need. If I just want to search something little, or if I need to search something big, everything's available to me.
Having the Chromebook helped me stay more organized, and instead of having a bunch of papers, I was able to do my work on the computer, which made it a lot easier to hand in things and make sure that I finished them. Also, having the Chromebook really like made learning more fun, I think, and like it was a new and different way than before, so I really liked that.
I think the Chromebook helped me learn because with technology these days, like there's so much more of it going around, and it's all you ever work with ever. And I use my cell phone a lot, and so I feel like it helps me. Like, how do I phrase this? Okay, I'm so used to working with technology, and I feel like we're like bumping up our school system with using more technology is just going to be beneficial, since that's just how our generation is working.
So before I turn it over to one of our pilot teachers, I do also want to point out that while we were strategic in rolling it out to students that of different levels, of different experiences, motivational levels as well, we also were certain not to just involve teachers in the pilot that are those that we know use instructional technology every day. So we tried to look also for a range of teachers, some that are technologically savvy and others perhaps not as savvy, and so we could get a widespread view. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Erin Moore. Erin is one of our social studies teachers at North High. She teaches the interdisciplinary global connections. And Erin will share a little bit about her experience.
Hi, thank you for allowing us to come today. As Gina said, we've been using the Chromebooks in our interdisciplinary class since about February. And so I just wrote down a few notes about some of my observations with using the Chromebooks with the students. And first and foremost, it's been a great tool to use for formative assessment and getting that great immediate formative feedback. We've been able to use it through the use of Google surveys, Google Forms, but also we've been able to find a way to combine the smart technology and to use their Chromebooks almost as a big giant clicker. And what's unique about that is that then we can take that data and we can export it into an Excel file in which we can keep tabs on, okay, this person might be struggling with this particular assessment, and we can show them, we can show their parents, and so it's been nice to see the merging of those two. Second, it's also nice because we've been able to delve into the idea of differentiated instruction. So an example of that is we were looking at political cartoons and we were analyzing some of these images, and I gave the students the opportunity to either A, take notes on their Chromebook with a template that I had created, and they could have a split screen so they could be looking at the image and then typing their notes as we were discussing. Or there are some students who said, I don't really like that. I prefer to have the old-fashioned pen and paper, and I want to hang on to my notes. So students were then able to tap into what they felt most comfortable with. But I think the last part that to me is probably one of the most powerful is watching students help other students. So when we get into, we're working with a document and we're asking them to create a folder and move something into that folder, you have some students who struggle with that, and I don't know how to do that, and to watch other students say, oh no, this is how you do it, and walk them through the process is pretty amazing. But also, we were doing a project about different genocides, and the students have to give a presentation about a particular genocide. And this one group was really, really struggling with the genocide that they were assigned. And I kept trying to give them some info, like, remember there was this massacre, it was outside a church, and no. And so one of the students had his Chromebook who was taking notes, and he plugged it in. He said, oh, it's the Santa Cruz massacre. And then the student was able to, oh, yeah, it was the Santa Cruz. So again, it was a great opportunity of seeing a student help another student with the use of technology. So I'll turn it over.
Okay, and now we're going to hear from Chris Gales. Chris is a biology teacher at South High. He teaches the integrated studies program that I shared with you, where the students have English, social studies, and biology. And they have the same 3 teachers. So, Chris?
So I'd like to start by thanking the board for having us come in and talk to you tonight about this. I think it's really exciting and an important educational initiative. The site that's posted up here on the screen is the website that I'm using with my integrated studies classes. Number one, these are students who oftentimes lack organization, and so having a site that they can come in and see every day at the beginning of the period allows them to really frame what they're going to be learning during the day. And then lately, of their own initiative, they've kind of started using this along with their Google Calendars on their Chromebooks, sort of as an ersatz assignment notebook. A lot of times the students lose their assignment notebooks or forget to use them, but if they have their Chromebook out in front of them, all they need to do is look at what's on the screen, and they know what they're doing for the day, and they plug that information right in. I put together just a little bit of information up at the top in the one-to-one pilot program tab there. A couple of talking points here. First of all, I think that the number one big thing I've seen working with this group of students is that it's empowering them to learn in many different ways, and I think ways that they're really comfortable with. As we saw in the video, the technology is what they're using, what they're used to. It's the world they live in. So a couple of links here. The first one is an example of a student portfolio. This is of a student who we had them create a site. They have a tab for their biology, English, and then social studies classes. And then what I've done with them is given them a variety of assignments focusing on various aspects of the curriculum. And they go in and complete their assignments and then post their assignments onto this website so they have a record of their learning. So a wide variety of assignments that dealt with biotechnology, a little bit with evolution, and some genetics there. The next tab here is an example of the inquiry project. This is something that we do in integrated studies at our class in the freshman year. And Rod, I'm going to ask you to look for Matt Adams. And he's got, if you click on the first link there, it's that's not going to be the one. Well, let me just talk to you about this. We don't want to waste too many time looking for the document, but it's essentially we ask the students to learn a process called the inquiry research process, where they ask questions and then they go and research those questions. Now, traditionally, we've been booking library time, which limits us. With the Chromebooks, we can have students work on these inquiry projects at any point in time. If we finish one of our lessons early, we have maybe 20 minutes left over, they're going to jump on that time and use that for their inquiry project. These are, by the way, semester-long projects, so they are really delving into topics that they find important and want to learn about. They can organize all their information in their Drive accounts. And what you're seeing, this screen that you're seeing here is called the Teacher Dashboard from Hapara. And this is an amazing piece of technology that allows us as teachers to see everything that they have, not only in their Drive for our classes, but also in their Drive in general. It's a great piece in terms of just classroom management and the management of the documents with the students. I think the next thing I wanted to show was the increased student engagement. This was an example of note-taking. My integrated studies students, I think as Gina mentioned, struggle with motivation and with work completion. These are students who you might ask them to take some notes on a concept, and they'll take notes for a few minutes and then sort of give up, or the notes that they take are illegible. Oftentimes you can't read what they can't even read what they've written themselves. So I've taught them a strategy called 2-column notes, which is a really well-researched note-taking strategy, and then taught them how to use Google Drive to produce notes, and then the research feature where they are able to dig deeper, find images to include with their notes as well. And then just one other thing I wanted to show, and it's right on that first page right there, is this is a picture that you're seeing here. This is actually a picture taken from my Biology 400 classroom just last week. I'm not, my Biology 400 students are not part of the pilot program, although there are a few who have teachers that are in the pilot program. And the girl you see in the foreground here is in the pilot program. Her classmates are not. And she's been using her Chromebook in my Biology 400 class extensively. And this particular picture, I had the students work on generating a graph of some data. And this girl was able to input her data and get her graph completed before the girl in the background was able to get logged onto her desktop computer. So empowering them not just with the technology to do the research, but the efficiency with which the work can be done. And I think the more quickly we get, I think when we're working with these students, they are going to, they live with this. Again, we go back to that idea that this is the world they live in. All we need to do is provide them with the learning opportunities, and they're just going to jump all over it, like you see in this picture here.
That's fun. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. So just to summarize, we wanted to share a little bit with you tonight about the pilot program that'll be concluding in just a few weeks, and how students and teachers are changing learning in the classroom, and how students are really embracing it. And it's really nice to hear about the different groups of students, because it's not just one group of students, it's students at multiple levels, teachers at different levels of comfort in terms of their own technology learning. But we wanted to hear from the teachers.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Any questions?
Does anybody have any questions?
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
It is.
I really like how you're taking it to the next level, and how you kind of you thought it through. You picked different levels and different teachers, and I think you're going to get some really good feedback back from that. And it's not easy, so I got to say thanks to the teachers for changing the way you do your day-to-day thing for a trial. So I appreciate and thank you very much. So
Thank you.
be looking forward to see what your analysis down the road.
Yes. So do you think this summer you'll be having your evaluation done and let us
Right,
know?
our plan right now is to come back to you later this summer with more of a complete report about all of our findings, including the pilot, with recommendations on how to go forward next year, and then probably some questions about where to go after that,
Right.
based on that. But
Right, yeah.
certainly later this summer we'll be back to you with more information.
Good.
Looks like we're off to a good start. So
It's pretty hard
that's
to go
good.
backward from
Exciting.
this. Yeah. We just have to find money. Oh, that,
Okay, well,
right?
Thank you again. Should we go on to master facility update?
Yes, we should, but we probably have to rearrange some seats. All set? Okay, the next presentation is about our work to develop a master facility plan. And I'm going to hopefully set the stage tonight for the board by having the board go back several years to the 2010-11 school year, when we did a long strategic planning process. No, not everyone on the board now was on the board then, but several of you were, and others were candidates. and you actually came and participated and observed the process that was happening. But it went on for almost 6 months. It involved more than 30 different focus groups. It involved over 300 persons from the community, students, teachers, parents, community members, business leaders, community leaders, and anyone else who wished to participate online or by attending meetings. And through this process, we came up with a number of themes, one of which was that it was evident that we had facility issues in District 99 to address. And specifically, there were some areas of our schools that appeared to be overcrowded. Our school auditoriums were too small or in need of upgrades. Our schools had HVAC issues, particularly in the non-air conditioned areas during hot months of the year. Our outdoor facilities were worn and badly in need of upgrade or repair. And frankly, our school facilities in general did not seem responsive or potentially adequate or adaptive to what many people envisioned to be schools of the future. And you had a sense of that tonight in our presentation, what they might be. So, it's not surprising then the facilities became one of the 7 themes of the strategic plan, and we've had strategic goals based on that theme every year since 2011, when the strategic plan was approved. And I would like to share with you some of the major components that we have of the strategic plan that we have implemented. For example, master site plan resulted in major changes on both campuses. For athletics and physical education space and the complete campus revision at North. Completed a major HVAC renovation at South, which made the building substantially more energy efficient, improved heating and water systems, and created the infrastructure for air conditioning at some point in the future. We completed and developed a new center to house our transition program for special needs students who are preparing to enter adulthood. We've completed and implemented a master facility maintenance plan to guide our ongoing maintenance and development of the district's capital assets. And finally, or the final piece of this, is the development of a master facility plan, which takes all the above into consideration while also answering the question, what should our schools look like and function like in the future to best meet the needs of our students? So we started this project in the fall. If you look at a master facility plan in total, there are actually 3 phases. The first is visioning, which we started in the fall with a small group of district leaders assisted by our architects. And frankly, this phase produced some ideas. Second phase is one we're currently in, is information gathering and analysis. We've completed this internally with our staff, and the second phase is to go out and gather input from parents, community members, and other constituents. And the purpose of this phase is themes. And we're going to share some of those emerging themes tonight. Third phase is planning and recommendation, and here the ideas and themes will translate into potential structures, changes, timelines, and costs. And at that time, the board will discuss what work it wants to do, thinks it should do, how much it wants to spend on the work, how and when that will take place, how we will pay for it. Those are all answers or questions for the future, not questions for now. We're not there yet. So tonight, our hope is that we can explain the process to date and discuss the emerging themes with you. And the use of the term emerging, again, is purposeful because our analysis is not yet complete. I'd like to introduce Mr. Craig Siepka from White & Company, who's part of the presentation.
Hello, everyone.
Also, Jim Collegier, as you all know, Ed Schwartz, as you know, and Ken Sorensen, as you know, are part of this. Jill Browning has a sick child and had to stay home. She is a part of this as well, and I'll try to fill in for her. So I think Jim is next?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Jim.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald. I'm going to try to take you through the last few months with the 3 steps. Our first was visioning and process preparation. Back in October of 2013, our district team, along with White & Company, met, reviewed our thoughts and what our goals would be for our facility needs of our schools. So we started brainstorming. In November, we met with North and South department heads and administration and asked them to go back and gather information at their needs of their spaces and areas that they teach and work in. and start gathering some information. So we gave them that task to do back in November. Go ahead, Ryan. Second step, information gathering, assessment, and analysis. Just to take it back to January of 2013, as you remember, we did building audits, White Architects, for about a year. Went to all campuses, including this building, and audited from top to bottom, HVAC to floors, ceilings, walls, and gathered all that information in an audit. And we have all that, and we put it into a Planning Direct School Dude software. So we have that information. In January 2014, we continued to have our monthly meetings, updating where we were and what our next steps were. February started the building tours. White Architects and our campus leaders, Ken Sorensen at North and Ed Schwartz at South, walked throughout the building and discussed, and Craig and his team listened to concerns and what the needs were. March of 2014, all departments were interviewed by White to collect data on their vision of facility upgrades and needs for future educational program changes. Not only did White meet with the department heads, they met with CMG, support staff, technology, and 8 audiovisual services. So they met with many groups, many hours, many meetings. I'd like to take a moment and thank these groups for their participation. They were instrumental in gathering valuable information and did a great job. Their time was really appreciated. So we got a lot of information from these groups. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken Sorensen and Ed Schwartz, and they're going to talk a little bit more about the interviews and the tours at their respective campuses.
You know, Jim mentions that in March, they spent a lot of time interviewing department members. That actually was a several-month process. Late fall, just before the holidays, White and Company came to both schools and met with our leadership teams, and we kind of outlined the process that we were going to take. And we really challenged our leaders to think big. You know, don't limit yourself to just the walls that you're surrounded by now. Think about what you could have and what you envision needing in the future as we move forward. So we processed through that with our department chairs and members of the leadership team, gave them some tools to take back to their departments, and over the next couple of months, they spent time meeting with their departments and gathering input of what do you see as a future from the perspective of their academic department. And that is actually what led up to those March interviews. And each school then broke down representatives and met with our architects individually without us in the room so they could speak freely and not be biased by our opinions. And that is where White and Company got much of their information.
And we also tried to encourage them to try and think outside the box. So are there any roadblocks in instruction based on the facilities that they currently have that we could eliminate in the future with some renovations or changes? And also trying to think proactively about one-to-one technology. How does that change your vision of a classroom and learning environments, and try to think about expanded classrooms without walls and that whole learning process and how we're kind of flipping education on its end when we think about technology and possibilities of renovations in the building. So, and it was helpful because White was there to present some visuals for them to kind of plant the seed in their creative minds to think outside the box. So we really wanted to open it up as much as we possibly could to get them to generate some ideas that maybe normally they wouldn't think of. It was very, very, I guess, exciting to hear those ideas.
Okay, my turn. And before I get going, what I would like to do is introduce 2 members of White and Company. Rich Carlson, who's the president of our design division, also a resident here in Downers Grove. And next to him is Amy Lacani, one of our integral team members here for this particular project. And actually it was Amy, myself, another gentleman, another one of our colleagues, Rick Dewar, who had the opportunity of sitting down for many hours, actually not always sitting down, we did a lot of touring too, and really visiting with your staffs. And one of the key parts of this part of the process is sitting down, asking a few questions, really getting into a conversation, but listening. intense listening. That's what this is really all about. And I have to tell you, it's kind of interesting, actually very interesting. When we do that, we usually, and we meet with such a diverse group of people, you usually find contradictions, you usually find things that aren't lining up or adding up. And I have to tell you, that didn't happen here. Straight up, everybody in the district, from department to department in each building, and then from building to building, is all singing the same tune. That never happens. So I think that's a kudos to the leadership here in the district and to you as a whole, as a stewards here in the community. So congratulations on that. With that said, when we did meet with everyone, we also heard some common themes that developed over and over again. The 4 items that we have listed here on this particular slide are those 4 those themes that continually resurfaced when we engaged in conversation. And really it starts with fabrication labs, the need for fabrication labs. And by that we mean STEM, places for collaboration, innovation studios, maker studios is what we call them. That's really a place for the students to get their hands dirty, to work with each other, come and develop different types of different projects and get engaged in a variety of different ways. Instructional environments was a big theme, and not necessarily the fact that you didn't have enough classrooms or that you had to have 10 more in each one of the schools, but looking at the existing traditional instructional environments that you have, and how can those be better equipped to become more flexible, to adapt to evolving curriculum mandates that you have here in the district. And we do that through technology and furniture. So it's really not about knocking out walls, doing a lot of heavy renovation or extensive demolition work, but really equipping the rooms in a way that supports what's happening between the students and the teachers, enriching that environment accordingly. Fitness was a big issue. That's also fitness and wellness is a common theme that we see a lot in school districts. Everyone becoming more conscious about taking care of themselves, not only mentally but from a physical standpoint. Really, a lot of the conversation centered at both schools, seeing what we can do to move the instructional space or the spaces that are in the basement of each one of your buildings up to the first or second levels, get them out of the basement. How we do that is going to be one of the challenges we'll talk about in the next slide over here, but it is something that we need to consider heavily as we move forward. And then collaboration zones. And when we talk about collaboration zones, we're talking about efficiency of spaces. Education happens 24/7, right? And it doesn't happen just within the confines of 4 walls. It happens everywhere, all the time. And I think, actually, I was looking at the videos, I couldn't help but think about this particular item when you were interviewing the students, and all of them, almost to the T, maybe with the exception of 1 or 2, were not in a classroom. They were in the hallways.
They were in the hallway.
Right. That's not a coincidence, huh? So what can we do to make some of those transitional zones, the places that were typically just for getting from point A to point B, how can we make them more enriching? Engage them. How could they become part of the instructional environment that goes to making every square footage of your school, or as much as we can, as much as possible, make it usable for instructional purposes, engaging students both in a casual as well as a more formal way. Of course, all of that hinges upon also leveraging technology to our benefit, and the idea of having the one-on-one initiative and all of that, enriching your student experience or your children's experience through technology can happen in these particular spaces. So those were the common themes. Then as we look to each one of the schools, of course there were other things that were specific to each one of those facilities. Over at North, the site improvements, Tier 2 implementation plan, we heard Dr. McDonald talk about, this master site plan that you completed for phase 1, I guess, if you will. There's a second phase there that's involved. There's some items on the list that need to be looked at and perhaps planned for. Infrastructure improvements, that's a result of the building condition assessment that Mr. Collegier had mentioned that we accomplished last year. Over at North, we're looking at roofing replacement, some mechanical items, in particular air conditioning and what improvements we can make to the boiler plant to help support and maintain the infrastructure that you have there right now. And then from a curricular standpoint in the instructional area, the Library Resource Center, that particular item is really coming under heavy scrutiny in a lot of schools throughout the area and actually across the nation, as we're looking at libraries to do more than just be warehouses to store books. There are opportunities really to engage students in a whole different way, in a whole different level. Is there a way to take advantage of that here, or especially over at North? Over at South, again, we start with the site improvements, Tier 2. Those are a little bit different. There's some different items there than over at North. Infrastructure improvements, again, considering heavily air conditioning and how that could benefit the environmental, educational environment for your children. Then the bottom two items there, performing arts, really the size, functional limitations of that particular space over at South is such that we need to look at how we can increase and make that space a little bit more functional to house more students and perform the kinds of functions that you are expecting to happen in that space. And then, of course, the administrative offices. They're pretty tight over there and confined. Are there ways that we could reorganize the space, maybe expand that to some degree to keep it on par with what we have over at North, and certainly what is needed for the types of functions that you have at that school? So a lot of things to look at as we move forward, and with all of that, there are challenges that we need to consider at each one of the campuses. And starting with North, the beautiful vintage character or quality that you have in that school is really something going to be something that we're going to need to look at and preserve. The detailing, the craftsmanship of that particular building is something really worth preserving and acknowledging in whatever improvements, certainly respecting whatever improvements that are contemplated or recommended for that particular facility. But of course, you have limited land availability there for expansion, and so the idea of really taking a close look and creative uses, multi-use of space is going to be really key when we get down to the planning and recommendations part. Maximizing existing building footprint for changing programs and services as your educational experience for your children evolves. How can we reorganize the space, restack the spaces that are in the schools, again, to support what's going on there in that very restricted and tight floor plan that you have right now? It's going to be a creative challenge, without question. And then certainly the age of the building is the improvements that we need to do to the infrastructure really is something that we need to pay special attention to in this particular facility, again, just because of the age of the building. Over at South, the idea of a more visible and welcoming entrance is going to be key and something that we need to consider heavily as we look at improvements. Making and modernizing really what is a very efficient footprint, school built in a time when education was delivered to children in a different way. How can we expand their learning environments? And that's the whole idea of collaboration zones. Spaces, areas, doing double duty, become even more efficient than what you have right now, but serving a different purpose, which is going to be really key. When we talk about North, and the challenge is going to be moving upward in a vertical fashion. Over at South, everything is pretty horizontal. So getting from one point of the building to the other is a challenge for a lot of students as they go about their day. How can we minimize that? What are the opportunities and things that we could take advantage of along the way, or that students could take advantage of along the way as they go about moving from period to period and class to class? And along with that becomes the idea of easing the congestion as we go from floor to floor. you can never have, I guess, hallways that are wide enough and enough stairwells and so forth to get kids and make it easier for them to get from one part of the building to the other. So it's things that we'll look at. And of course, when you look at each one of these facilities and all these challenges, uppermost in our mind at all time is the idea of safety and security, and how can we maintain what you have and even enhance it. So that's going to be a big challenge, and something that we're really looking forward to as a team as we move into phase 3.
That's a lot of information, I know. What do we do with it? Step 3, planning and recommendations. We get all this information, and we're trying to filter through, prioritize. What we'd like to do is get a consensus of what we're hearing and get a plan together. Build scenarios, phasing schedules, implement it, put costs to it. One of the things from a facility standpoint, I love this, of getting all the stuff that I got thousands of eyes out there that are catching things that I may not catch. We have our capital project plan every year, and I can start prioritizing and putting those into our budget for every year. And as we spend our monies each year, I can start pulling some of these items that we can do immediately. So that's, for me, I could look at the capital planning and see, wow, that would be great to do this year. Didn't think we'd do that for 3. Didn't even know we had that out there, and maybe we can get this part in and start working on that soon. So step 3 is putting it all together and bringing recommendations. And finally, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. McDonald.
As
Our
I
next
said,
steps.
thank you, Jim. As I said, we are frankly still in the information gathering analysis phase. We have really exhausted, I think, internally that process. Now we need to go out and get external information, or external people that don't work here information. So our plan is to have several community meetings and allow constituents, parents, citizens to attend and get feedback from them. Our initial plan was to do that during this school year, but in our contacts with other school districts who have gone through similar processes, the recommendation is to do this in the fall instead of now, or especially not in the summer. So our plan probably will be to do this in late August, early September. Exactly how we're going to do it, we haven't determined, but that's probably when we're going to do it.
Wow, it's exciting.
Time for a couple quick questions?
Yes.
Sure.
In January, we started monthly advisory meetings. Are those ongoing, or?
Every month we have meetings since last August.
Keep everybody in line.
We said January 2014 monthly advisory group meetings. So is that when that started?
Continued? No. That was just an update that what we were doing in January of 2014. We had meetings every month prior to that and every month after that.
Every month after. Okay. I love the thought of just the creative sort of thought of, we have students moving from class to class, and they're in the hallways, and maybe the hallways are an opportunity that we hadn't thought of, and I really like that. And I'm wondering, going forward, as we think creatively and other solutions, and you mentioned that some, in the classrooms, technology and furniture and accessories are one way to make that classroom more adaptable. But a better understanding of what we have is certainly important, and I know that's part of the information gathering that's being done right now. So understanding what the capacities and the utilization of our existing facilities, I think that's important too. And are we going to get that in terms of hey, we could actually have more students at South or North, or in understanding some of those things is important as we look at our demographics going forward and what we expect to happen. And so will that be part of it, part of this analysis?
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely goes into all our thinking. That's a great question. It's something we didn't get involved in great detail for this presentation, but certainly with whatever planning scenarios develop and come out of the step 3 or the third step. That will go into supporting whatever those recommendations are, or certainly developing them.
Right, okay.
For sure.
Right, and because there's a number of ways to solve these sorts of problems, right? And we talk about the management of time and schedule, and changing, just by changing the way we do things might make the facilities work a little bit better than what they do, and that needs to be part of this analysis as well. So, but exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to hearing how these emerging themes play out, and great to hear that there's some consensus in terms of what we, where we could use a little help and make things better.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you were saying that that's not always the case. So I'm not sure whether I want to take that as a good thing from the standpoint that we really have great leadership, or some of these things are just so glaring.
Obviously, leadership, Mike.
We're going to go with leadership, but it's good to get consensus early on, so better feeling like we're going to be on the right track in terms of the answers. So
it makes
thank you.
It makes the information and actually the final plan that we recommend that much more powerful.
Right.
Without question.
So, an example, Mike, of what you're speaking about, it's also tied into the one-to-one initiative.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a number of rooms at both schools that are computer labs.
Right.
Maybe they don't need to be.
Not suggesting that there will no longer be any computer labs, but there will be fewer computer labs, simply because...
Or just the rethinking of those spaces, right? Just like we're talking about the library and what's its current, use. And having spaces that are more flexible and adaptable to emerging technologies and emerging ways of thinking about how we educate our students. So definitely making the most out of what we have is an important important goal here.
It's really going to activate the spaces in a whole new way, which is really exciting. So,
thank you.
Your time?
I'm done.
I have two quick questions, and I'm sorry that I was late. So if this is redundant to what you've already talked about, I can talk to you offline after this, or through Dr. McDonald. But to Mike's point, how are we looking at, or are we working with people who have kind of their finger on the pulse of where technology is going, so that changes that we recommend in any given space that will certainly support technology today? When we hardwired the, that's the wrong word, but when we rewired the schools a couple of years ago, I don't think we were thinking about tweeting and social media and things like that. I mean, do we have anybody who's looking at the technologies that are evolving that would be able to better prepare for use in schools?
I think we all are. I'll let Ed and Ken, the technology gurus from the two schools, speak.
Gurus. To that.
Well, I think kudos to Rod and the tech team for trying to think proactively. Years ago, I think 3 or 4, we thought about it's going to be important for our students to be in a wireless environment. So we did upgrade the whole infrastructure in our buildings to be wireless, trying to think ahead.
Right.
Even though we weren't going to be wireless that year, we were trying to think ahead, and we put access points in every single classroom and every possible learning space so that kids would have access, so that wouldn't be a roadblock in the future. It's hard to predict how technology might change, or even what it's going to look like 5 years from now. It's maybe a little easier to think about maybe next month because it changes so fast. But there are a lot of schools out there who are using some technology in very creative ways, and we're trying to connect with them too as we think about facilities. There are some school districts that do come to mind who have gone through some facility changes, trying to think ahead in terms of how this might impact the technology, because we don't want to be in a position where we make all these changes and then it becomes a roadblock. We want to be as creative and open-minded as we possibly can, so that even for those things that we might not be able to predict where we're going to be with technology, that it won't be a roadblock. It's hard to think that far in advance, but it's certainly on our minds.
And I would add this: I haven't met anyone that can tell us what technology is going to look like or how it's going to play out in 5 years, because I know 2 years is tough sometimes. But kudos under Rod's leadership too. Simultaneously, we have some technology consultants here who have put systems onto our network to track traffic. to see if we're capable of handling more. So Rod's working with them right now. Last week, they sent some people out to South, and during lunch periods, we opened it up to any staff member that wanted to come down and offer feedback and answer questions about our technology. We also took them into the cafeteria during a open commons area time and hooked them up with kids. And they sat with kids and got kids' feedback. They met with the members of the administrative team earlier in the day, and I believe they're going to do the same thing this week, later this week at North. So Rod's, we're trying to get ahead of it. So as we roll out these pilots and eventually every kid, that we stay ahead and address those before they become issues.
And from a facility standpoint, I'm working with Rod to make sure we have enough electricity, backup for generators, for anything that we would be implementing within a certain period of time. So from the building structure and electrical, that would be one of the key components. We are also working on that.
Great.
And on top of all of that, if I just may add, you know, the idea that you can't look 5 years, 10 years out with what's going on with technology, that's exactly the reason why when we talk about spaces and involved in our thinking is the idea of flexibility and spaces to be able to be transformed so they could adapt and change as technology does as well. So it all kind of works together, and hopefully in the plan that we show you at sometime in the future here, we'll be able to point all of that out to you.
Great.
If I may, just one thing. How long ago when did we do the additions and renovations at the two schools?
Around 2000, 2001 they opened.
Okay, so about 13 years ago. Was there a similar planning process done at that time? I wonder if that information is still available, and if any of that would hold any relevance or might be for comparative purposes.
I pulled it out of the files when we started this last fall.
It's there.
And it's only 5 pages, a written document, and some things have been addressed. Other things we're like, I'm not even sure that applies anymore.
Okay.
So it was interesting, but we did pull it out at the start.
And I would have suspected that, but still, that
was mostly hardwiring.
Right.
Yeah, it was interesting because I wasn't here at the time, so to read the perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, most of us weren't here.
Right.
I was. Some of us were.
I mean, in the administration, most of us
No,
weren't
I
here.
understand.
Mark was the only one, and Rod.
Yeah, Rob
Okay.
was here. Yeah.
And then could you just speak a little bit more about the fabrication labs and what those are going to look like? I mean, is it going to be limited to STEM type of activities? Are there going to be?
I don't think we know yet. We even know yet. We don't know.
No.
We don't know
We're
yet.
so early in the process, it would be hard to really say, but the idea of STEM, and actually now we're even expanding that to STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math.
Yeah.
And really what it is, it's about collaboration, right? It's about students coming together, peer-to-peer, student to teacher, and even student to community members coming together and working jointly on projects in a way that will enrich their educational experience. What that means for the district is something that remains to be seen, will be unveiled, and as we get farther into the process. So I can't tell you because I don't know.
Yeah. Well, right after you solve that technology problem. No, I was.
Years ago, Nancy, I attended, there's a presentation by persons from the Maine Township High School District. They had received a grant from Northwestern, or were working with Northwestern, and they created frankly, a large open room for which they did fabrication, meaning you build models. Or you do experiments. It's a place where sort of a purposeful multi-purpose room, and it serves the needs that you designed for it. But it's sort of a large space that's dedicated to that process. It's not. We don't really have any such space in our buildings at this point. We'd have to clear out a place to do that. We don't really have one.
I was just happy to hear, although STEM is, of course, incredibly important, that A was added for the arts, because it would be a shame to do something going forward and not think about arts and letters.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
Any
I
other-
like STEAM. I like
Any other questions or comments?
I'm good.
Can't wait for the next step.
We are holding our breath, so hurry on. Thank you very much.
Before we all turn blue.
Exciting project.
Yes,
Thank
it is.
you.
Thank you.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have a bit of another Change of seats. Each year, the associate principals, the principals, and the deans of students get together and work collaboratively north and south, look at the student handbook, particularly the attendance and discipline sections. Also look at changes in the law, and they recommend changes to be added to the student handbook. We have these approved by the board at this time of year. Certainly afterward, we send them to the printer so they can be printed for the student handbooks that we pass out in August. We still do have printed handbooks. They serve a variety of purposes. How much longer we will print them, not sure, but we still do that. And one of the reasons we have the board approve them is that in fact makes them board policy, which is very important. So I'm going to introduce again Ken and Lucia Mastrodimos, who are associate principals in charge of this function at their respective buildings. And they're going to make a report to you about the changes that they recommend, and you will be voting on these in the action item section.
Well, thank you for having us this evening. The handbooks are printed and digital. They can be found online, so there's a step in the right direction. So, as Dr. McDonald said, Lucia Mastrodimos is joining me here. She's from South High School. So the recommendations that we're going to share with you this evening represent new or revised language that follow either new legislation, revised policies in District 99, or better reflect current practices. The first page of the memo that we shared with you in board docs briefly outlines the 8 recommendations. The subsequent pages represent a more detailed description of those changes. So I'll share information about clear and present danger reporting and social network passwords. Lucia will talk about Project 99 and electronic cigarettes. I will then talk about bullying, our bullying policy and telecommunication devices, better known as cell phones. And then Lucia will finish with language about police consequences in our category A and B offenses. So if it's okay with you, we'd like to share with you all the recommendations and then spend time afterwards addressing any questions that you may have. Is that okay with you, that process? Great. So beginning on the second page then, the first 2 items address new legislation that's important to include in our handbooks. Clear and present danger language will read as follows, and this is really, it really talks about reporting incidents where we feel like we might have someone who does present clear and present danger. So when a student or other person demonstrates threatening physical or verbal behavior such as violent, suicidal, or assaultive threats, actions, or other behaviors, they may be determined to pose a clear and present danger. Law enforcement officials and school administrators are required to report individuals determined to pose clear and present danger pursuant to the Illinois Administrative Code listed there. So we have literature in the buildings that talk about those details and the responsibilities on the principal or the designee of the principal to report situations like this to Illinois State Police. So this is all information that obviously we share with our administrative staff and to make sure that teachers who might see this know what to do. So we're going to share this with all of our staff in terms of the reporting features, but it's up to us as administrators to file this information with the Illinois State Police. The second part, second item is social network passwords. And this will read, as you see there, in accordance with Illinois House Bill 64, schools may not require a student or his parent or guardian to provide password or other related account information in order to gain access to the student's account or profile on a social networking website or to demand access in any manner to a student's account or profile on a social networking website. This does not apply when a school has reasonable cause to believe that a student's account on a social networking site contains evidence that the student has violated a school disciplinary rule or policy. So obviously, if we have reason to believe that there was a rule that was broken or concern for harm or something, we do still have that right to access school or social networking sites, or at least ask for that information to gain access to that. And this is outside of any accounts that are established with our CSD 99 passwords. So kids can use their CSD 99 email address to set up an account. Those are still within our acceptable use policy.
So if a student, Dr. Sorensen, creates a social networking account using their District 99 student account, we do not have access to that because
We can.
We do.
Yes,
100%.
that's part of our acceptable use
Okay.
policy because they're using our CSD 99 domain.
And then when it's not the case, is there still the reasonable suspicion aspect that applies?
Yes. We can only ask for that if we have reasonable cause that a rule or disciplinary action might be warranted.
Thank you.
This language right here is right out of the Public Act?
Yes.
Okay.
The next two items I'll discuss with you. The first one is Project 99. As many of you know, that is an alternative or in lieu of expulsion that is offered after some administrative consultation and review. And in the section on expulsion, that language was added so parents are made aware of that. So this is new language that's been added to the section on expulsion. And the new language is that it reads as Project 99 is an alternative program that may be offered to both North and South High students in lieu of expulsion. Placement in the program is initiated by the dean and the associate principal and approved by the principal and the superintendent. Students are considered for enrollment on a case-by-case basis. Factors such as the age and grade level of the student, credit status, nature of the discipline infraction, and the family's ability to accept the parameters of the program will be considered when recommending a student's placement in the program. Expulsion proceedings will be reactivated for students in Project 99 who violate the discipline code or fail to meet the minimal behavior and/or academic requirements and expectations of Project 99. So there is an entry meeting when that offer is accepted by the parent, if we so deem that that is the way we want to go with the student, and there is a series of requirements, attendance, daily work in and outside of the program, and other such parameters that students are expected to complete and maintain, and should they not do that or misbehave while they're in Project 99. We have in cases in the past reactivated expulsion proceedings. We just want to make that a little more clear to parents and added that to the section on expulsion. And the second the second item for me that I'll discuss with you is electronic cigarettes. Again, this is new language that's been added to our handbook in the section on tobacco use, smoking, use of possession of tobacco. Right now, it's in the Rules Committee, so it's not a village ordinance citation like it is if you're under 18 to have the tobacco. But many schools are getting attention for students that are using the e-cigarette device. So in the area on smoking, use, or possession of tobacco, we basically changed it to include e-cigarettes. So the items that are underlined are the sections in the handbook that are now including electronic cigarettes. So smoking, possession of tobacco, or electronic cigarettes are not permitted on school grounds. Students are not permitted to possess or use tobacco or electronic cigarettes anywhere in the school building, on the school grounds, or at any school-sponsored functions. So that part is changed to include the use of electronic cigarettes. In the second paragraph, the underlined section again is changed to add the electronic cigarettes, and it states that students are not allowed to possess or use tobacco or electronic cigarettes at activities such as athletic events, plays, dances, and other social gatherings. The possession or use of tobacco or electronic cigarettes by students is also forbidden on field trips and activities sponsored by other schools in which students participate officially. So that is another addition to reflect the changing times, and the use of that device is becoming quite popular.
The next two items, the first one, bullying. This language is being revised in the handbook really just to match the current change in board policy 7.20. I believe that was approved in August of this school year. So I don't know if you need me to read all of that. I'm assuming you've seen that before, and we just want to be consistent and on the same page with board policy. So that just is really an update to our student handbook. The next one, telecommunication devices, cell phones, revising this to better reflect current practices, and with all this talk about one-to-one technology and master facility ideas, wanted to update this to be more inclusive of opportunities, so to speak. So we've you can see some language that's stricken and some language that's added. So I'll read the top portion here where the change is most prevalent, that says smartphones, cell phones may be used while students are assigned to be in the cafeteria and in the hallways during passing periods. Smartphones, cell phones can only be used in instructional settings under the supervision and approval of the teacher or staff member. Students must be able to hear and respond to any communication from a staff member, and then it's the same language thereafter. We're trying to get rid of the use of personal digital assistants. That's just old,
Such old stuff.
antiquated language, I guess. So the idea here, as you've heard, the use of smartphones in the classroom has become a useful tool in a number of ways. Formative assessment for teachers, and they allow students to, if they have a smartphone, to use that as I think Aaron mentioned the word clicker. So students can respond with their cell phone as a kind of a reporting device to solicit an answer to a question, and the teacher gets instant feedback by student to kind of see if he or she needs to reteach, adjust, or hey, everybody's got it, this is great, and move on. So, and also, social media these days, where we have teachers using social media as a means to collaborate. Twitter is one, where we have students using their CSD 99 domain to create a school Twitter handle. So the teacher's creating these online communications and collaborations for students on any topic. And so right then and there, learning has expanded beyond those 50 minutes in the classroom, because it's happening while they're at Starbucks, while they're in the car, not driving, in the back seat, or in the driver, or in the passenger seat, or if they're at home. It's just, it continues the conversation and the learning beyond those 50 minutes. So it's really exciting to hear teachers using that technology and having the, I guess, taking the positive risk there. Just access to the internet. If it's needed in the classroom, if they don't have access to PCs or laptops in the classroom, and by teacher direction, if students need to in a small group use their cell phone to access the internet, that's been used too. So as we talk more about one-to-one technology and possible master facility changes, excuse me, we want to promote and embrace learning beyond the classroom throughout the day, and we think this is one step in that direction. So opportunities exist in hallways, in study halls, in cafeterias for that to happen. So we want to provide those opportunities for students. Of course, we also want to use this as a learning tool. If they're not using it properly, if they're using it in a classroom when they shouldn't be, obviously there are still consequences there, but it is part of the real world, and beyond high school, they're going to have to make decisions on when and where to use their cell phone. And we see adults using it improperly. So I think there's also a learning aspect to this, life skills in a school setting that we can apply. So that's the direction we were going with this. And it was just interesting to hear Chris Gales speak a little early about, it's the world we live in, and the student in there who said, I don't have to use my cell phone, I've got a device here. And a lot of these things can be done using a device, whether it's a Chromebook or something else. I guess I'd be hard pressed to find a teenager using a cell phone as a phone.
Yeah.
It's more about the access to collaboration with your friends. So that's part of what we want to embrace here. These technology-infused areas that Craig talked about in the presentation, in these common areas and collaboration zones, and we just think that the benefits of this type of policy outweigh, any of the challenges, and we don't suspect there's going to be, too many challenges with this. It just seems to be the right time to do it as we think about one-to-one technology and master facility upgrades. So.
All right, the next area I'd like to discuss is the addition of the word or phrase, I should say, police consequence in any of our violations that reference the word arrest. And I'm new in my role this year, as you know, as is Ken. And we also had a new SRO at Downers Grove South this year. And one of the things that came to light through conversation with both officers on both sides of town, all three I should say, is that there are connotations to the word arrest that I think we think of as cuffing someone, arresting them in a squad and taking them to the station, and they're becoming a criminal jacket. But because we're dealing with juveniles, there's a lot of juvenile laws that pertain to our kids that don't really involve arrest. So they're called police consequences because there are things that exist like informal station adjustments, peer jury, village ordinances, and so none of those result in a true what we think of as an arrest where the student is fingerprinted, they get a criminal jacket. Mr. Bild and I were involved in a lot of these conversations earlier this year. We then had joint meetings with the North staff, brought in our SROs, they put together a nice packet for me explaining what all those mean because I'm not really familiar with police work. So we decided that it was best to, when we reference, when there's a major violation and the word arrest was in there, that we said police consequences or arrest, or arrest, because I think parents and the public and we were under the assumption that that always meant it was a criminal, history for the child, and it's not the case when they're juvenile. So that more accurately reflects juvenile law. And we're very fortunate this year we have SRO Mark Walters from Woodridge, who has 20 years in juvenile law, and so he was very good in kind of leading us through this process of understanding all the various options available to our kids. So you'll notice as I go through the next item, which is the category A and B violations, in our handbook we have what we call A offenses and B offenses. A's are considered minor, more minor, and B's are your things like drugs and weapons and things like that. So the charts that you had, the A offenses, there were 3 code violations that were changed to reflect all the items that Ken and I discussed. So for instance, item A8 talks about unauthorized use of iPods and MP3 players, and since we reflected we all know smartphones function as those items as well, we changed the language to make sure that it got struck out where it said during the school day and just left it at unauthorized times, since we're now changing the way we're allowing students to use those devices. In code A18, which had to do with the possession of tobacco, we added the electronic cigarettes to reflect that as well. And then in code A30, again, there was another code in that section talking about the use of cell phones and other telecommunications devices, and we added the at unauthorized times again to more accurately reflect the allowance of those during the day. And then in terms of the B code violations, there was a few that, again, were changed to reflect the changing policies, adding of electronic cigarettes, the wording in that, or the phrase in that in B2. And in B9, one of the items that was added was that B9 talks about assault and battery, and there's a lot of instances where students are threatening using electronic devices, so posing, threatening messages via text, via Facebook messages, perhaps, speaking directly about a threat. And so we added that express threat through verbally or through the use of electronic communications, because that is a lot of what we're seeing in the dean's office is that kind of communication. So maybe not using them so smartly there. B16, the language in B16, item number 1, talks about weapons that are not allowed in school, and the word ammunition, which is underlined there, was added. And so that, again, is something that we, again, crosstown discussed that we'd like to add. And then a very new code, a new B code violation, B23 at the very end, is a new violation that was added, and that is repeated acts of disobedience, misconduct, or gross insubordination. So a student who has quite a history of repeating the same item, the same sort of infractions or violations. So that code was added, and the consequence there would be a 10-day out-of-school suspension, police consequence arrest, and expulsion procedures being possibly recommended. And then again, you'll notice on the on the right-hand side under disciplinary action, anytime you'll see the word arrest, you'll see next to it underlined police consequence to accurately reflect the juvenile laws that we're dealing with. So.
A question for you.
Sure.
When I look, and this is not a new piece of language under category A, I'm looking at academic dishonesty, number 27. And when I'm looking at the circumstances, it's pretty vague as far as a severe or broad scale of incident involving academic dishonesty may result in suspension or expulsion. But when it goes into the first, second, and third offense, really, if I'm a student, I'm looking at that, there's really no offense. I mean, your first offense, right, no academic credit. Second offense, no academic credit, there's a conference, there's notification. Third offense, no academic credit, notification of teacher, conference. I mean, there really doesn't seem to be a differentiation between the three. And when I look at number 19 that talks about lying or cheating, I mean, you get a Saturday detention, it's all spelled out there pretty much in black and white. I don't know that 27 really reflects a clear deterrent. Because I think, at least in my experience as an educator, students think that borrowing homework, Julie's doing homework, hey, do you mind if I look at that? And I just started, they don't think that's academic dishonesty in any way. And I think there's a lot of blurred lines of distinction that I think should be corrected, particularly as we're moving with higher forms and more intricate forms of technology.
That's a good point that you brought up. 19 is really lying or trying to deceive school personnel. In those cases, they're mostly, we've had kids who say they should be in one place, they tell the hall monitor I'm supposed to be in study hall, and, they're not. In terms of the academic dishonesty policy, there's a committee that works on that policy, and that's something on our docket for looking at over the summer for the next year. It's just not something with a lot of the new changes in administration. That was called to our attention, a little bit later in the year, so that is definitely on our radar, and that's one of the things on our list to start looking at this summer. So.
Yeah, my point is just looking at 19, there's a clear consequence, and that seems to be more of a bigger deal than cheating or academic dishonesty. Oh, it's no big deal. I mean, I get no credit, big deal. But a lot of schools, your second offense, regardless of what, let's say it happens in a science class, you lose you're cheating on a test, you get a 0 for the test. If you get caught a second time in any class for any situation, you fail that course. Yeah. So that there is an effective deterrent that says, hey, it's not tolerated, and I think that would be more effective, something to look at for your committee.
We will be looking at it, especially in light of the assessment practices that we have in District 99 and seeing how that, jives with our philosophy and assessment literacy. But it is something we're definitely, Ken and I have discussed that we'll be talking about at Executive Council.
Right, thanks so much.
Okay. So to that end, is that something that we'd like to ask?
I think I'd
appreciate
like
you
to
coming
have,
back and letting us know what your final decisions or your final
Probably be a
recommendations
change
are.
for next year, so we'll be here probably a year from now. But yes, we will be updating you on that.
I think you need a little bit more teeth in that. I agree with Keith, because my school, the second offense, it's the quarter. The quarter's done. And so Keith's right on the money with that. So I'd like to have that readdressed.
Yeah, and I think for myself, one of the things that happens as we go year to year is I lose track of it. I'm going to ask you a question that demonstrates that in a few minutes. So I would ask that we put that on the parking lot to have you come back or have Mark represent you and come back within
right. We can
a
maybe
month
do it
or
that way
two or
too.
whatever and say this is what.
It'll be over the summer.
Well, there's a committee of teachers that oversees this, maybe Ken can speak a little bit more to this, but I know that it probably won't happen before the summer's out, but it is definitely something we'll discuss as administrators and then bring to the.
So can you just give us a 6 months, 5 months?
Oh, right, it's the next school year, for sure.
Okay, beginning of the next school year?
I think it's our interest to go back and look at all of these discipline policies in detail, and when we have downtime in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, these get changed slightly from year to year, and after 10 years, the initial intent is lost. So we do have an interest in going back and looking at these across the board and making sure North and South have the same statements in their handbooks and the same expectations. And it's just, we're sort of at a place in time where we have to submit this for the printer soon.
Sure.
Right. And my aspect is not to be punitive, but it's to give clear guidelines and parameters,
Right.
for our students, so they know exactly what the expectations are. And it really, at least in my 15 years, it's so much easier to be academically dishonest. I mean, it's not even funny.
When does this have to go
And
to
so
the
I
printer?
think we just need to be a little more vigilant, because as you move forward, and we try to, have these teachable moments for our students, it's not accepted in the workplace. I mean, borrowing somebody else's ideas or this, it's just not acceptable. And I think they need to understand that lesson the sooner, the better in this type of setting. Thank you.
So we'll anticipate that you guys will work on this over the summer. We understand it's going to the printer, but can we put it on the parking lot to come back?
An addendum.
Just so we're feeling more comfortable with it.
Thank you.
Okay, and the athletic and activity code of conduct?
Oh, excuse me. I have a question. I'm so sorry. You moved ahead too fast. In terms of the use of technology in the classroom, how are we going to police that, and how are we communicating with the students what the expectations are for when they can freely use their their phone or when they're restricted in the schoolroom.
So that's in a classroom setting, in a study hall setting, the library. That's under the direction or approval of the teacher. So students, can't have, if they're taking a test, if they're, they can't have, the teacher will clearly say, maybe it could be, we're not using cell phones at all unless I say, if you have one, now's a good time to use that. So in a classroom setting, that seems like the most logical approach at this point.
And we do go over all the rules to answer your question. The first day of school, which is a split schedule, the deans go into the freshman group and discuss all the rules, and we hit the highlights and we hit the ones that have changed, which for the freshmen, they're all new. And then for the upperclassmen, the first day as well, during their lunch periods, they report to a space where each dean and counselor and someone goes over the new rules and highlights them. We also have our Mustang Way and our Positively North teams work on anything that may be a change of practice or behavior for kids, so that's sort of hit hard in the beginning of the year. And I know both sides of town have talked about, perhaps that being the September lesson, and kind of focusing on that behavior, and teachers know, in their classrooms what their policies are, and also do that, classroom rules and sort of behavior expectations the first day or two of school.
Because we all have stories. With our own children. Thank you. Did anybody else have anything before we move on?
No, I like these are all good improvements, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
I would like to apologize to the board for all these reports tonight, but one of the casualties of having that training at our workshop was we had to transfer some of those till tonight.
Yep.
Typically, we won't have this many.
Quite all right.
Especially when you don't follow through, Mr. Pavanato, with your dress code. It's just a little busy on the camera.
Remember our training?
Well, we could talk about the
told you
tie, too.
I told you the pay for words. All right.
We're not in charge anymore.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
lady?
for having us. I believe you have in your board packet the Activities and Athletics Handbook.
Yes.
We have two additional pieces of language that we'd like to bring forward today. I have one concerning the permanency of digital media and how it affects the code of conduct, and Denise will have some things on hazing. This first part, I believe, is on page 6, and I think you have it bolded. Two more bullet points that we'd like to add. Give you a little background. We've seen an increase in code violations being submitted that we believe is really for the purpose of punishing students involved in extracurricular activities, that we believe is vindictive and lies outside the spirit of what the code of conduct is supposed to be. So all four of us got together, kind of reaffirmed that our code is supposed to be about helping kids make healthy lifestyle choices, ensuring that they're representing their teams and our schools and our communities in a proper manner, and then provide progressive levels of discipline that will help them get back on the road to making healthy lifestyle changes. Well, the electronic media presents challenges because these did not exist when the code was first written. Specifically, the permanency of electronic images. Thus, images of code violations can be submitted anytime, regardless of when the violation took place. And so it begged the question to us, what is the relationship between time passing and student accountability to enforcing that code? Basically, what we're trying to do is introduce some sort of language that will give administration the latitude to take a look at those situations and make sure that we're acting appropriately in terms of a statute of limitation manner in these things. So what we'd like to add is, first, reports of code violations shall be reviewed by administration. That's always been implied, but we wanted to make sure that we got that down in writing there. And the second part is really the meat of this change. Any violations of the code should be reported to the administration immediately. Any extended time between the violation and the reporting may limit administrative ability to enforce the code. And that gives us the latitude, we feel, to kind of judge all these instances as they come up.
So when you're judging these instances, where are you landing? Where is your preliminary thought?
Keith, it really is going to depend. I had an instance recently where the violation was reported. I brought coach down to say, hey, we've got it. Kid showed me the cell phone. There it is. It's a violation. I talked to coach, And Coach said, "That's interesting. We've already dealt with that." And I said, "What do you mean?" And Coach said, "That was 9 months ago when student X already self-reported this and has already gone through this process."
Still there.
But never went to your level.
So it did. It went through our level. It's just that I wasn't sure what he was
Well,
talking
that's what
about.
I mean, the immediacy part, it didn't
Right.
get to your level. It was just
Yeah.
handed within the.
Right, right. So it's interesting that they're all going to be a little different, I think, in terms of actually when they come through.
Wow.
And for what perceived purpose we are. We've seen a lot lately that, all of a sudden they'll come across our desk right when it's playoff time. And I'm not sure that's really how we want to use this code. And so we just want to introduce something that lets us get together and say, okay, what's going on? That child that violated, and if it's proven to be violation, right, there's certainly something that's going to have to happen there.
Right.
But do we really want to hold that kid out of a playoff game for something that happened
And he's
X,
already
X,
addressed.
X amount of time ago? So.
So you're saying that people are holding on to these and waiting
Sounds like
Good playoff
for their own purposes?
Yes.
We've had it at both
Yep,
campuses.
we've had instances,
So,
and in activities as well.
and the other example I can give is, for instance, if it's October and it's a Halloween party and it's clearly the same pictures from the same event, they've resurfaced. And so we've been able to investigate and go, it's the same
It's the same party. we
picture,
just-
same, it's
yeah.
just a different picture. But the vindictive part that we get frustrated with is, so it is October, let's say, and then they'll wait and there's a state tournament or something, and then they'll send the envelope.
that's just wrong.
And so that's just, you're waiting, and then you should just report that right away when you discover that, so we can handle it and get, more importantly, get the athlete help if needed. And so that's what we've been running into.
Thank you for doing this.
It's interesting. It's a shame.
Any other questions on that aspect? Okay.
Hazing?
Yeah, so actually, I had a good conversation with Mr. Tice, and we, as you know, a couple years ago, we started to really get into the hazing situation and educating our coaches, and we definitely have board policy, which we make sure is in the handbook, but we thought, when talking with Mr. Tice, that we need to give more examples of what hazing is, because it can be confusing, what's in everybody's mind can be different. So this language actually we use and give to our coaches to describe, and we felt like it was necessary to put in our athletic activities handbook, which will also go into the student handbook, because this is an extension of that, which identifies more examples of what that means and what it looks like. And so we just felt that was really helpful to add that in there, even though it was a little, I think at first we left it out because it was too lengthy. That was just basically it. And we said, no, it's probably really important to put those in, even though we have them elsewhere. So that's what we've updated there.
Good Lord.
It's kind of an extension. I mean, there's more prevalence of students using social media in general, not necessarily to haze, but to be unsportsmanlike. Are those types of situations being addressed either through this code or through our teams and activities?
Yeah, we, as a matter of fact, I don't know, Keith, if you got a chance to view our online healthy lifestyle. We actually address that there, and we address it with the coaches and with the kids.
Does that need to have language like as far as sportsmanship in here to cover that?
I think we're pretty, I think our coaches, and we could definitely look at that. That's not a problem. The coaches, we also have that as part of their, what they should do routinely with the kids. We have those discussions, obviously, but we certainly can always look at that, adding in language.
Because students obviously are not banned from exercising their freedom of speech, the First Amendment right to talk about our team or our coach or the other team, but I think there's certain instances where those things cross the line. It's difficult to understand exactly what it is.
I guess what we really would have to decide is, does that belong in the code with that first, second, and third level consequence in the code? Or should that be more of a team disciplinary thing, which if it is repeated and continued and there's a trend, now we're going to invoke the egregious acts such that we feel we have to act in the code. We got to sort through that. It's a good idea, though.
Yeah, always good to look at.
Bring it up.
Before you move on, did you have a question, Deb or Mike? No. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Not on this one.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you.
You're always having to keep a step ahead of them.
I don't think we can.
It's a great effort, though.
Dr. Kupka, there were no Freedom of Information requests this past month.
Thank you. Okay, consent agenda. Does any member of the board have a request to discuss anything on the consent agenda a little further? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as it's been presented. Do I have to, I guess I have to enumerate each part of it?
No.
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
I'll second it.
Okay, Julia motions, Rick seconds.
Julia Beckman,
Aye.
Rick Pavanato,
Aye.
Deb Boyle,
Aye.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Keith Mattoon,
Aye.
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
and Nancy Kupka.
Aye. Thank you. Awarding of bids, capital improvement.
Mr. Collegier?
Thank you. Okay, these are white architect projects for the summer work. Bid documents were developed for public bidding. We had 24 bidders. As you can see in the document, I put in board docs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different companies awarded low bids. I'll go through the projects at each campus. At North High School, 3 projects. As you remember, we already came to the board with the pool dehumidification units for North High School. This part is for the dehumidification equipment installation. So that's one. The second project is the gymnasium lighting, a small gymnasium at North High School. And lastly, the library ductwork repair that is needed over there. Real quick, the white gymnasium, they call it, at North, the small gymnasium, we're removing 1,000 watt mercury vapors and putting in LEDs, 140 watts. So big savings there. At South High School, 2 projects that these bids cover, the math office renovation and relocation, and the auditorium lighting project. It's lighting upgrades and repairs, including the wiring, house lights, and controls. Once again, these are fixtures that are old, outdated, and have wattage that's very high, and we're putting LED fixtures in. So promoting better lighting quality in the auditorium and cost savings. Also, as I believe last month, I told the board that we received our $50,000 maintenance grant for the dehumidification project at North. But these other projects will be applying for the DCEO grants, the lighting projects at both schools. So we look forward to possibly getting some funding back to offset these project costs. The bidders we reviewed are familiar contractors. They've worked with us in the past few years, with the exception of the painters, but they've worked with White, and I'm familiar with them from a different district. So we believe that low bidder is, the scope's been reviewed, and they'll be able to do the project. So as a sum of all low bidders, the total project cost $768,735 is what we're asking the board to award. Questions?
I think it's.
Yeah, the HVAC?
That would be for the math office renovation and relocation for the 2 different areas. We're knocking out a wall to open up a bigger area that will involve some ductwork and some HVAC work in that room.
So when we work with White & Company for the redesign, and again, I apologize because I was late.
That's okay.
Are we giving any consideration to just improving the air, the HVAC system throughout North and South to effectively heat and/or cool?
In these projects,
No, I know we're not in this project, but,
into the master facility
The
plan?
master facility. Yes.
Absolutely.
okay.
And every aspect, looking at the global, how will it affect this area? What air
Okay.
handling unit does it involve?
Okay.
How will that HVAC unit, will it be part of this wing? Should we replace that when we do this work? So That's the short version, but hope it answers your question.
Sorry, I just derailed, but I forgot there was a question I wanted to ask on that one presentation. I'm sorry. Any other discussion or questions?
Just, how are we paying for it? So,
The
for
board will
record?
recall every fall, we put together a budget for capital work in the district. I believe $1.5 million.
1.7, Mark?
1.7. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes a little less. So we present these projects to the board in the fall, bid them out in the spring so that we can take advantage of the summer.
Right. And
So the budget is already there. We have an annual capital improvement budget that will pay for these projects with.
and so these fit into the budget?
Yes.
As a group, they are, go ahead.
Sorry, are we still taking advantage of any of people needing work? The contractors, like, we were getting such great deals when we did the project last year.
Specific to this
Are they more in
round
demand now?
of bidding, there was 24 bidders. That's a
Yeah,
good
that looked
number.
good. Yeah.
I think what we're doing is bundling these projects, which is helping,
Cost savings.
and not being specific to one school and having two different contractors where
Got
they
it.
can bid high on one job. So when we bundle the electric work that's at both campuses and give that one bidder a award, I think we get a better price.
Yeah.
So I see some savings there. So
Great.
that's what I've been seeing, and having 24 bidders for
That's
the
very
5 projects was pretty good this
From a
spring.
process standpoint, but in terms of some of the really great pricing we were getting because of the
Yeah,
economy
maybe
being
not so
down,
long ago.
that's gone
I
now.
think that's a few years
Yeah.
back.
I just thought I'd
But there's
ask.
still some hungry people out there,
To make sure
Which
there's
is
good,
good.
hungry people.
and good quality workers.
Any other questions?
That's a segue.
I move that we accept the bids for the summer capital projects.
I'll second the bid, or the
Terry
motion.
moves. Mike seconds.
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Keith Mattoon,
Aye.
Rick Pavanato,
Aye.
Julia Beckman,
Aye.
Deb Boyle,
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye. Moving on to the food service bid.
Mr. Stalen.
Well, this is an unusual situation. We are recommending a new food service vendor in our district, and my Aramark, and there's a couple of representatives here, have served us very well for 25 years, roughly. So the first time in my tenure here that we've had a change in vendors. The context, however, is that we're part of the National School Lunch Program. Every 5 years, we're required to bid out a new 5-year contract to remain in that program. It's closely monitored each step of the way in preparing the specifications. They have to be submitted to the state board. When we review the bidders, that has to be reported to them and approved by them. And even after an award, presumably tonight, we'll have to give them the original document that was submitted to us for the record. So it's very closely monitored by the state. We did. It is a public bid. It was published. It was. We did contact. In fact, the state board tells us we have to contact at least 5 vendors and gives us a list of those people to contact, who are in some way, even though they're some way pre-approved by the state because they know they work with them and they're the more I would say more significant vendors in this area. And we're such a large system that we really didn't get any vendors that don't work with schools in pretty large size. So we didn't get what some would call the mom and pop operation here. We did contact five schools. We contacted more than 5, but 5 came to the walkthrough, which was a mandatory meeting, to ask questions, to hear the details about the specifications so they understand it. And to view the operations, and we went to our South Campus so they could see that there. Only 4 vendors elected to submit formal bids. One sent us a letter of declination, Sodexo, and 2 are regional and 2 are international, big international companies. The lowest bidder was Quest Food Service Management System. They're markedly lower than the other 3, and that's something that we noticed, and having just gone through
similar issue with busing. It was still fresh in our mind. We contacted just about every high school, well, any high school in DuPage County and even some outside of DuPage, to get a feel for the quality of this group. I put out emails to my West Suburban group, kind of in a blind way. Does anybody hear anything good or bad about Quest? Let me know. And I really was looking, honestly, for a reason to just because of the long relationship, to kind of mark them down in terms of their criteria. I did not get one bad reference on Quest management. In fact, they were all very high. They do operate a little bit differently. They make more meals from scratch with fewer processed. They're located. Their office is located in Lombard. They're relatively local to us. They work with Glenbrook High Schools, Batavia Public Schools, Hinsdale High School 86, even Manuka. I mean, they're in the area. They're a fairly large organization, not certainly as large as Aramark or Chartwell Compass. But they actually are in every case, and I don't think there was one where they didn't say they're delighted with the food, they're delighted with the management of the company, and so there really was no way for us to discount them just because their bid is lower and significantly lower than the others. Now I did grill them on that. They said, yes, we are going to take a small loss in the first year. But their long-term vision for our program is that they believe they can expand the participation in the National School Lunch Program, which benefits them and us. And they said it'll take more than 1 year to do that, but by the second year, they expect to turn that around and have a long-term positive experience here financially as well as just for our students. So. And I've talked to other districts and said, have they expanded the National School Lunch? And the answer is yes, they have. So they have been able to, and they're saying they're going to do it by the quality of the food that they present. I think a similar situation where actually another high school nearby is not in the National School Lunch Program, but bids it out periodically anyways, even though they're not legally required to. And Quest was the low bidder there, and the board was considering, well, let's look at the second highest two and do a taste test and do these things, and their teachers group came to the meeting and said, don't take Quest away from us. And so they are ingrained in these schools and they do a good job. That's what I'm hearing from everybody I talked to, and I did, because of the dollar amount, look at them very, very closely. One of the individuals who's the regional manager that is assigned to it, actually is the regional manager for this area, is a former Aramark employee who we have experience with. So we do have a high confidence level in that person. So, I mean, there was nothing here for me to red flag. It seems like a very high quality organization. They have a transition meeting planned tomorrow with administration. They have the meeting tomorrow is with the Aramark staff, the employees that would, by contract, and by the way, this work, be offered positions in their company. That's part of how you have to do this when you transition. The state board requires that they be offered that position in terms of their specifications. The following day, they'll be meeting with our administration and also some students. They wanted to meet with a grouping of students and to talk to them about the program and to try and see what they can do in terms of customizing their approach to the school. So each school is a little different, and we've known that even with Aramark. Aramark does the same thing. They customize their cuisine as much as possible. So they're already wanting to do that and move ahead. So it's very unusual only because we've had such a long and a very good relationship with Aramark. I indicated in my letter Aramark, I would still give a very positive recommendation. But in order for us to stay in the National School Lunch Program, and we need to, I think, financially, and would want to, we are required to take the lowest bid. And And also state law requires that we take the lowest bid for responsible bidders. So that's my recommendation, and I'd be happy to field any questions you have, or...
I've got some. First, I'll say that I was hoping to have some conversation about all of this. One being, I don't know that, I'd like to have a conversation about whether or not we need to stay in the National School Lunch Program.
We do. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know that, I've never asked that question before, and we've never had a discussion about that before. So I'd like to, I'd welcome that discussion, because I know that there are other school districts that choose not to. And I know that one of the ways that they make that successful is by increasing participation in the school lunch program that they have. Right now, one of the things that I observed recently, Terry and I went to lunch at South just around spring break so that we could see for ourselves what our students are experiencing. And I was really, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but as I looked around the room, I would guess that maybe 80% of the kids were not taking a lunch. We're bringing a lunch from home. And one of the things that's disturbing to me is that you put in place this school lunch program from a nutritional standpoint and things you want to accomplish with that. But how can you accomplish anything if you've got 80% of the students basically voting, we don't like the food, we're not gonna take it. And I don't, with all due respect to Aramark, I think they might be doing about as good a job as you could do with working under the umbrella that they have.
Parameters
that are set
the federal
forth.
government has set up for us.
I know that there's a new regulation going into effect here this June, and Aramark gave us a nice presentation about some of that earlier. That even affects what the kids can sell for fundraising and have for snacks and things in the classroom. And so, all of this has really got me thinking about looking at what we're doing, how we're doing it. And I'd hope to have a conversation about that before I saw something like this. We just got this on Friday, and I was surprised to see it, and so definitely would like to have some conversation about it. I'm not prepared to vote on this evening, and if I have to vote on it, I'll be voting no. So that's where I'm
Well,
at.
maybe we need to ask Mark, why are we in the school lunch program? What are the requirements? Why are we there?
Right, and I'll apologize for that. I didn't even think that would be something to consider, only because financially, we looked at this, even through working with Aramark 4, 5, 6 years ago. I think we looked at this a couple times, and at that time, we've more than doubled the number of students that are eligible for that program, and so we're more reliant on state and federal reimbursement of this program as it is right now. And I can only say that to not support this, I can understand that, but we would, if we don't allow this group to transition in properly and say we're going to put it off a month or two, that will damage the ability for them to get the people in place and get their procedures in place. So I guess I would ask you to consider that aspect before voting no. We're more dependent on this program now. Now, to say would we get out of it, it's possible. I think we'd want to really study it and look at not just the impact, but also the political aspect of saying we don't want to serve as healthy a meal, because the only way that other schools are... I know that, but the only way that other schools are recovering the financial aspects of getting out of that program, which would be somewhere near $400,000, $500,000, is to start selling soda pop and things like that are not as healthy. Otherwise, the kids, you can do your own home version of it, but I think what's happening is all these vendors are catching up with those. Now, I know there's some new things coming in next year. Quest will say that they prepare food differently and will have a better tasting menu of the things. That's yet to be seen, but it would be quite a move for us to move away. That's why the scope of that was not something I considered that we would be doing here. I hadn't heard that. If someone had asked me, Mark, we want to consider getting out of that, I think I could have been prepared to do that. We would have had that conversation perhaps back in February or so, or when we would have time to really plan that. For us to pull this out now would be very difficult.
I think the surprise is that we're just learning that we have to bid on a contract last Friday. I mean, that was my surprise. I had no idea. And now you're asking us to go 1.1.
5-year deal.
A 5-year deal, $1.1 million, when we've been experiencing outstanding and excellent service with Aramark. And now, in 3 days' time, you want us to totally vote on a contract which we have no credibility and experience with, and I'm not prepared to do that. And it's not about the nutrition aspect or let's get, in the headlines for political debate. It's about, I don't know what we're getting, and I don't know why this wasn't brought to our attention sooner. And I'm not prepared to vote on something this quickly.
Well, my only response is this is something we've done every 5 years. We've followed the same process every 5 years.
Yeah.
We've not done a two-step process in the past, so I apologize for this being a surprise for some or all of you, but those board members that have been here more than 5 years know this is the process. It's so heavily regulated by the state, it's almost like applying for a Title I grant. It's like, okay, I wasn't expecting to approve, go for a Title I grant this week, but, it's done every year. This is done on a 5-year cycle because of the way they structure things.
Mark, I think if you could address, and I do recall that we are required to take the lowest responsible bid. I know that. That's true of other things we do, too. This is specifically much more difficult. But if you could address that 5-year contract, I know it seems like a lengthy contract that we're committing ourselves to. Is there any sort of way out, should we say?
Well, there is. I mean, it's something that we could terminate in a year after, if we dislike the program.
Yeah.
We could get out of it. We're not locked into, my expectation is, though, with the new vendor coming in, that we would try to make that work. But if you were to say, well, we want to get out of the food service program in 1 or 2 years, that is something we could do, and we could opt out of it. We have the right to terminate this contract.
Without cause?
Yes. They also do. The vendors, it's a two-way street. I think it put it in my letter that either side has a right to
get out,
to terminate. And I think it's only 60-day notice. Now, this company has never done that, and we would have never done that to anybody else. But it's in the contract. That's part of the state specifications for this.
I guess I would ask Mike, what would be your goal here? Because, this is sort of a boilerplate process.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of wiggle room. This is very prescribed by the state and federal government. The rules are pretty clear. They monitor it very closely. There's not a lot of, what's the right word, wiggle room or...
Well, when we renewed, each year when we renewed Aramark, we indicate how many years it is into the 5-year agreement and that it's renewed. And so and it's even on the form that you approved that this is the 4th year. The state has, you check which box. Is it the 4th renewal of a 5-year contract, so that'd be the end of that contract. So I apologize for not pointing it out more clearly to you. But this is something that, depending on how, unless you're willing to have another meeting rather quickly so that we could discuss it further, the only other options are, if we don't approve this contract, would be to go back out to bid. The second highest bidder, there's some clarification, we'd have to go for that. Aramark is the 3rd highest, all right, so we would have to
third lowest.
Restart the process, and I highly would not expect us to do that, but once a bidder, it's just like going out for bid on some construction and saying, well, we're going to go back out now. Everybody knows each other's numbers, and we don't know what we would necessarily get an unbiased or fair bid.
Right, yeah, my apologies, but I'm still not clear, if we're not going to use this process, if we're not going to go in this direction, where are we going? What is your recommendation?
Well, so, number one, I've been on the board for 3 years.
Right.
So, not here when this happened before. I'm being asked tonight to approve a 5-year deal, making a big change, to a different vendor who we've been with for 25 years, and that makes me very nervous. You mentioned the bus situation, and so I want to be doubly sure that we're doing the right thing here. But more importantly, I noticed, there was an article in the Tribune recently that I came across that up in Arlington Heights, they decided that they're not going to participate in the national program anymore, and that they're going to still do nutritious meals for their students, but forego the subsidy from the underwriting from the feds, and they were going to increase participation, and I think we have a problem. I think we look at so few students are taking the lunches that it's hard to have good economies of scale with that. We've heard from Aramark before about how they could do so much more if we could get more of the kids to participate. And some of that onus is definitely on them, but they're burdened, they're hand-tied a little bit by these national guidelines. And I wanted to have some discussion about that. Maybe it's not the right thing to do, but I haven't seen any sort of study or any research that we've done. I want more information before I make a decision about this. I would be willing to have another meeting in the short term because this is a very important issue and involves a lot of money, and I want to get it right.
But is it your intent that we use a different vendor for this process, or consider one, or is it your intent that we do what Arlington Heights?
I don't have an intention other than doing some due diligence before we make a decision. And
I understand.
That's all. And I'm also willing to question some of the presumptions we've had in the past about this is the way we do it, this is always the way we have to do it. In fact, there are other districts that are looking at it a different way.
Right.
And maybe we should.
I wonder if I could ask, do we know how high the free and reduced lunch population is at Arlington Heights?
23%.
It's almost exactly the same as their percentages.
It's a little under us.
Right.
Okay.
Their percentages were very much comparable to what we're seeing here.
And I wonder how long that process took for them, though. I'm not sure you could make a decision like that, even if we have another meeting in 2 weeks.
Right.
Right, but the point is we haven't been given that option. And so we're asked as the elected officials on this board to make a decision in 3 days, from which, if we do have anecdotally 80% of students not partaking in student lunch, if we had more students participating, could we get a better bid? Could we have a better return on this economy of scale? We don't know the answer to that, and I'm not prepared to just say yes because it's a boilerplate, this is the way we've always done it type of situation.
Mark, I have a question. You said we're receiving funds of upward of $400,000, right, from this? If you choose to opt out, we would lose that revenue stream, right? Where would we get that revenue stream? Where would it?
Well, I guess Arlington Heights is proposing that the lunch program would pay the difference.
We would be charging our students more then?
No, there would be more students participating.
And that's what some other schools with a much lower participation level do. They subsidize those students' lunches themselves out of their own tax dollars.
At $400,000.
That's a lot.
Right.
I'd give it up $900,000.
Yeah. Yeah. They're giving up almost a million.
Sure. Much bigger district.
But I would just like to see some options. I mean, I don't think that we have enough options to make an intelligent, informed decision in 3 days.
So the options, just so I'm clear, because I want to present this to you and get it wrapped up correctly. The option would be to opt out of the National School Lunch Program.
Might be one option.
Would be that. What other options would you like me to prepare for you?
I don't see that there'd be another option, to be honest with you. Either you do or you don't, because if we're tied to the school lunch program, then these are the processes we have to follow. And the fact that we have, I'm hearing that we could end the contract without cause in a year's time. Is definitely makes me feel a little bit better. But still, I'm not. I mean,
can I make a
would
suggestion?
Compromise?
I was going to say just a compromise. I've heard two things here. One was angst over it being such short notice to make such a big decision, and I think that's a lesson we've all learned tonight. But the other option is looking at whether or not we want to participate in the National Lunch Program. And I would argue that even if Mark pulls something together, this is still going to be a rushed decision.
Exactly. I think we need a lot more thought going into that.
Yeah.
A discussion.
A discussion.
That part of it, I do. I agree with
Yeah,
you.
so
on
I
that.
was going to say the same thing. I think you were with, is there a compromise that we could go forward with the understanding that we'll be evaluating this over the next 6 months to make a decision for year 2?
Well, and I know
Where
I
year-
have,
Year 2 may not happen under Quest as management, is what you're saying then.
No, year 2, right, might not happen at all.
Right.
But I don't think even, I mean, I have to tell you, I'm totally ignorant of this whole issue, and I think that even if Mark pulled together some information in the next few days, I don't think that he's going to be able to answer all of our questions that will come to the surface adequately.
well, my other discussion that I had with Mark earlier was the 5-year contract part of it. I don't want to get locked into something, like our bus contract, that we find that we're not happy. And so he kind of cleared that up,
We've got an
knowing
out.
that we've got an out. So, that part I can live with if we have to. I am concerned about the length of time that we had to look at the contract. And I know this is too anal probably, but I would have liked to have gone and shopped Quest to see what kind of...
That's anal.
Yeah, I know it is, but...
No, I understand.
But-
For ourselves. Yeah.
I mean, we've shopped Airmark, and I don't think it's unreasonable for us to shop Quest and see what they're really like.
Too, is that a lot of the proposals that Mr. Stalen is saying that Quest is going to do after the contract has been signed. Why aren't some of those things, the visitation, the on-site visitation, why aren't they done prior to the contract to really get an understanding for what our population is and what we want?
Because to be honest with you, I've never heard of these people before. So
Two of us.
I have.
I'm not trying to be
No, but I think
difficult.
they
I
do
just-
have a very good idea of our population. I don't think they would talk to the Airmark employees until after they've been awarded a contract. And I don't think they would want to
Wouldn't
start
be allowed
soliciting the
to.
students. They feel strong enough in their abilities, their management abilities to customize something once they speak to the students. That's all they're doing is seeing what the preferences are for particular students so they can start, putting menus together that are something that our students would, like, that maybe others, small things, not wholesale things. They visited the site. Elena worked, I think, I don't know how many years. She's the individual who's with Aramark, so she has a strong familiarity. She was our Rich Rogas, if you will. I know Rich is here. I know. Yeah, right. But she was in that capacity running the program for several years, so they have a very good understanding of our building and our, so. I'll just say that
I
much.
think should be a comforting factor in that they are required to at least offer positions to the current Aramark employees who have been here and would really know what all the students are doing. To my mind, I really appreciate I understand everyone's concerns. I appreciate the compromise arrangement. Maybe we should have known about it a little sooner. I think if we have the chance to really study this whole issue over the next few months, we get the contract going, and then at the end of next year, we really take a good look at it. Frankly, I think it's the only path we have. Even allowing for the concerns of everybody that this was short notice.
Mark, can I help you?
Sure.
Thank you for listening to me. Part of the thought is that if you do sign the contract, they're 1-year renewable contracts.
Yeah.
And if you decide that they are not performing, you don't have to go back out to bid. You can take the next lowest responsible bidder, and I know Chartwell's did not have some signed documents, so it would be Airmark, so you could fall back on if they did not perform, you would not have to go back out to bid, and you could choose the next lowest responsible bidder. And Rich and I have spoken to the staff already and let them know that Tuesday somebody will be coming in from Quest, and have tried to ease them as we've wrapped our arms around them to let them know about the change if you so choose. But just want to let you know that.
Good to know. Good to know.
Thank you.
I think we're going to have to compromise.
So I'm going to,
I do.
And the last thing, it would, if, like what Mark is saying, and again, I want you to stay, and I want, Rich and I have talked about this. We are professionally supporting the decision. Mark has made some great decisions with us over the years. If you do not make a decision to move forward, you will put the program at risk. Because you have to get the staffs, you have to get their information to be able to communicate to them, to bring them back at school time, to be able to actually make them under their benefits and all of the things about what they are about that run your program, and you need them to run your program. So the staff is really an important key to that, and with Mark's recommendation, if you don't do that, and I've had a month to open up an account. In Waukegan, we won that. We had 3 months to open that. It was 150 employees, very large. We have about 47. And that is not a small undertaking. And so the more time you push that out, and to have only 3 weeks, it really will make an effect on how you have an impression for them to be successful, if that's the case.
Okay.
So
I think your question of whether or not we should even participate in the National Lunch Program is not something we will answer in 3 weeks, to be honest.
No, that's going to have to be discussed.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
maybe over the next
It's a
5,
huge
6
step.
months,
It's much more in-depth than.
we can revisit.
Mhm.
And talk.
I still like to reiterate, I don't like negotiating out of fear and out of, we have to do it. We don't have a choice. And that's not fair to us, that's not fair to our community, it's not fair to the employees. I'm very upset.
I'm not sure it would have been different even if we talked about it 2 or 3 months ago, though, because the requirements are what they are.
The difference is we're not having this discussion tonight
Well,
and airing our dirty laundry in a way.
Well, I can only say that the assumption, and I apologize, is that we would stay in the National School Lunch Program. The presentation was given earlier by our Mark. I did
Yeah.
not hear, Mark, let's take a look at if we want to get out of this program.
That's right.
Even
We didn't
start
say
thinking
anything.
down that vein.
If I had known, I'm going to start to get
Apologize.
angry now. If I had
Okay.
known that we were going to be doing this tonight, I certainly would have brought this up a month ago. I know Terry agrees with me. You know, Terry's called me about this. We've had, you know,
I would have
this is a big deal. Before I even suggest it to you, I need to kind of noodle it around myself and make sure it's something that I want to bring up.
I get that.
I was not prepared really to have this conversation tonight.
I get that.
And so, you know, this is a process issue internally, and you know, I'm going to vote in favor of this because I very much appreciate the
Yeah.
professionalism that's been
Thank you.
demonstrated
Very
just
nice.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and I appreciate the fact that this is something that in a year we can get out of if we
Yeah.
need to. I mean, that's the only thing that makes this thing possible
Right.
for me. Otherwise, there's no way. So
I get it.
I get it.
So.
You know, I get where we're at, but I'm just I don't want to do this again.
Yeah, no, we hear your frustration and Keith's and other people's, and I think we've had an apology to that end. So let's move forward. We need to take the vote now, but can we put it on the parking lot and say to come back in a month or 2 months with some sort of plan about how we're going to make a decision about whether or not we want to stay in the National Lunch Program? What does that mean? What does that impact? How does that impact us
Financially,
financially?
yes.
What are the alternatives?
What's happened at other districts that
Yeah,
have done it,
right.
and how has that worked out? And I mean,
Right.
that's all part of the kind of the fact finding I wanted to do a little bit on my own before I brought this up for a discussion. This all forced my hand.
Well, what I'd like to see us do is come back in a month or two with a list of these are the issues and the questions. I don't think that that Mark or other staff are going to have time to answer all of our questions. I don't even think we know all our questions. I certainly don't know mine.
No, I
No.
So let's come back with an overview of what this would mean, some of the barriers, some of the pros, some of the cons, and not even expecting that we're going to make some sort of decision that night, but that will start opening up the questions that need
The
further
dialogue.
research. The dialogue. Does
Yeah.
is that more palatable to people?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that work for you, Mark and Mark?
Yeah, I can compromise.
Yes.
Okay, so therefore,
Do you need a
we still
motion?
need a motion, though, to accept the contract so that we can go forward, so that we will still qualify for the National Lunch Program, but it is only with the codicil amendment, whatever,
Caveat.
that this will be evaluated within the next 6 months, and the decision will be made whether we will not renew in a year. Does that sound fair?
I think we can lengthen it, because I would really like to see how this is going to work out
Sure.
a little bit for Arlington Heights. I think, you know,
And see how
letting
Quest
them.
Corps does here.
Right, right. But letting them kind of pave the way a little bit and watch them.
Fair enough.
You know, I think we have the ability to do that.
But let's set a deadline for making a decision so that we're not back in this situation. 9 months?
I think I should just suggest, with all respect to Aramark, I think we'll need to have some experience with this vendor, and
Yeah.
also we'll need their
Oh, yeah.
expertise in terms, and how would they change the program?
Yeah,
Make it different.
absolutely.
And so this is probably a 9-month undertaking to
Okay.
change out of that program, to look at it objectively and say, okay, what would be the financial implications of coming out of this? There'd be some, I believe, even Arlington Heights, they marketed it very well, they're out of that program, but there's still a flavor of they can do a better job, they think, with healthy meals. We don't know.
We don't
if
know.
they can. And what does that mean? So I think there's a few different layers of for us to review of that side of the question. And again, I'll apologize, I didn't think that was on the table, and I think maybe it's just because my background is when we've looked at this in the past, it wasn't financially feasible. And so you're adding a new element, which I honestly hadn't thought about, and that is, do we want to just create our own healthy program separate from the government's?
Well, and what's changed in 5 years is the additional regulations that have come down at the federal level. And I think that maybe that's why other districts are looking at
Pretty
it too now.
prescriptive, aren't they?
So, yeah.
But I think too, I think that 9 months, that might be a final decision timeline, but I think 6 months is when we start the budgetary process. I think we're gonna have to see some hard figures and some data as the impact on District 99 specifically to us. And I think we should start looking at that.
Specific to the federal lunch program.
Yes.
We could probably,
I'm going to make the motion just to show what a good sport I am. Okay?
And I'll second
But
it.
before I make the motion, I'd like to make clear that, you know, this was, you know, I got the information Friday. I had to go out of town over the weekend. I've only had a few hours to really digest, and you know, honestly, this was not something I intended to bring up in open forum at this point, because I hadn't really thought it through myself, and I run the risk of proposing something that a lot of people look at and go, what's he thinking? I'd like to consider it more, but this really forced my hand in terms of the timing of it all, and I apologize for not being aware of that we're on a 5-year schedule here, and I should just know that. I didn't know that, and so I make a motion that we accept the food service bid as presented this evening with the caveats that Nancy has outlined.
And I'll second.
Mike motions, Terry seconds.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Rick Papadato,
Aye.
Julia Beckman,
Aye.
Deb Boyle,
Aye.
and Keith Mattoon.
Abstain.
And I vote aye. And please put it on the agenda for 2 months?
Thinking ahead, June, July.
Is that going to work for you?
Maybe August.
Yeah, I think we'll need to get,
I'd like to see the
Quest will have to get their feet on the
Quest
ground,
is
I think, a
gonna-
little bit,
But
so.
we get out in a year, so.
And I don't want you to think that we're expecting you to come
If it's
prepared
just
to answer
just
every
gather
question.
questions, that'd be absolutely fine,
Yeah.
even 1 month. But
Start sending them now.
But in terms of actually, because they're going to need to really get into our program in terms of some things. I would think even Aramark, it would take some time to sit there and say, what options would we have out there instead of the National School Lunch Program to try and minimize the loss, the financial loss to them.
And that would also give each member of the board time to think about it and do a little bit of research. And before because I hear Dr. McDonald going, I would be remiss if I think we offer I think I speak for the entire board when we say that we do appreciate all the work that Aramark has done over the last 25 years.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It's been to Mr. Stalen's point, it's been a very positive relationship. And who knows what the future will bring.
That's right.
So thank you. Mark? We have approval
Yes,
of-
approval of a student discipline call that was reviewed earlier this evening.
we have a motion? Do you have any other comments?
I'll second it.
Julia moves, Terry seconds. Any other comments? Call it.
Julie Beckman,
Aye.
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Deb Boyle,
Aye.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Keith Mattoon,
Aye.
Rick Pavanato,
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye. Approval of athletic activities code?
I move that we accept the changes in the athletic code.
I'll second that motion.
Terry moves, Mike seconds. Call a vote?
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Keith Mattoon,
Aye.
Rick Pavanato,
Aye.
Julia Beckman,
Aye.
Deb Boyle,
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye. And finally, approval of...
No, actually, that's off the agenda, Dr. Kupka.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
That was changed in the closed session.
Okay, thank you. Okay, old business, policy committee report, second reading.
In the interest of time, I'll just say
100
that, right, we're bringing forward a second reading of the policies that you see in the agenda, and I recommend your approval. We've had no additional questions or comments from board members.
Okay. So you're motioning?
I will if no comments, questions.
Rick needs a
All right,
second.
so I move that we approve these policies as listed in the agenda.
I'll second that motion.
Good way to do it, too, Mike.
Thank you.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
Julia Beckman,
Aye.
Deb Boyle,
Aye.
Keith Mattoon,
Aye.
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
and Nancy Kupka.
Aye. Thank you. Going on to school signs.
Thank you, Dr. Kupka.
You know, before you start, can I just stop for one moment? I know the hour's getting late. Do we need to take a few minutes break?
No.
Yes, please.
I'd rather move ahead.
Let's go, we're almost done.
But not if her
Oh, no,
bladder
this
is
is
going to explode.
This is going to be
2 minutes, 2-minute break.
I was like,
Let's reconvene, please.
All right.
Dr. McDonald, school signs.
Thank you, Dr. Kupka.
discussion.
We're at a stage, I think, of needing to move forward with a decision about our informational signs. And I'm talking about the one that currently exists at North and the one to be replaced at South. At this point, I do not believe the Village Council will likely approve a text amendment to its existing or future zoning ordinance that will allow us to install digital content signs. So I think we have three options. And you've received these from me in writing, but I will review them briefly. And frankly, the first option and the second, to a degree, pertain to the district's authority to construct digital signage without the village's approval. In essence, there is a legal question whether the village ordinances actually apply to us because we can claim status as a state agency, and thus are not subject to the rules of the local municipality of this sort. Additionally, the Downers Grove ordinance states it does not apply to signage at government buildings. We are a government building. So in either one of those cases, there is a legal question of whether we have to adhere to the ordinance or not. We have reviewed this scenario with our legal counsel, and or both scenarios, and they've advised us that chances of prevailing in a legal challenge are mixed. Some say there's more likely we would, some say there's more likely we wouldn't. It's by no means a slam dunk either way. So option one is to install digital signs at both our campuses and then wait for the village's response. I anticipate the village will have to respond to us either by fining us or invite a legal challenge with us about the signs. And as you already know, our chances are mixed in terms of prevailing in a legal challenge. The upside is we do prevail, then we have our digital signs. The downside, even if we prevail, would be the legal costs in addition to the construction costs, and also to our relations with the village for a number of years to come. We've been through this before, and that bad relations is predictable. I'd also say our taxpayers may not be supportive either, because it's especially those paying both ends of the legal bill. And I want to preface my remarks too by saying, nobody sat down and told me verbatim this is what's going to happen. I'm predicting this based on conversations that I've had. I've not spoken to any person in the village council. Obviously, they would not know for sure what would happen until they actually met and voted. I'm just making my predictions based about the information I have as I sit here today. And of course, there's always the issue of if we construct the signs, we lose a legal challenge. Not only do we pay the cost, but we have to tear the sign down and put a new one up or revise it in some way, which is an additional cost. A second option is a modification of the first, and I think this one is we don't address the sign at North. We've had people communicate with individual board members that they think that sign is fine. We shouldn't spend money on an existing sign. We don't have a sign at South currently. It was destroyed in the tornado. It needs to be replaced. South is an emergency facility. In the case of a community crisis, there's an argument to be made that that should be digital because of the communications value in that sort of event. So that perhaps is our second option. My perception, though, is that a digital sign at either campus will not go unnoticed. The village will have to challenge that.
If they choose.
Pardon me?
If they choose. Right.
Correct. I would predict they would, but I don't know. So then we're talking about the same legal bill and the same broker relationships that we would have in the first option. I'd also say that the north sign is out of compliance as it is. So the village is going to have to work with us on that. That ability to have them work with us might be affected if we construct the sign, a digital sign on the south campus, basically without their approval. And then the third option is to drop the digital sign concept at either campus, whether we like it or not. Leave the sign at north as is, install an equivalent sign at south, near or about where it stood prior to the tornado. Both signs would still be in violation of the current village ordinance, but we could ask the village to develop a text amendment to its new zoning ordinance, which would allow both signs. This is the least costly option for us. We wouldn't have to address the north sign. The south sign without digital contact would be less expensive, and of course we have the insurance money that would pay for part of it. We would not, to my knowledge, have any legal costs. And the village might be compelled to work with us, given the fact that we're willing to drop the digital sign question. And frankly, as you know, it's regrettably that it is, but the third option is my recommendation to you. I do believe digital signs have definite value in terms of communications with the public, especially in a crisis. We could have a crisis in either building that we could use that sign for, but I think they have definite value. That we do not have them while almost every other public high school in the county has them
State.
is problematic to me.
State schools too.
The same time, go forward. And again, I anticipate a legal challenge. And we lose, we're going to lose money, we're going to lose the public's trust. They'll expect us to solve this on our own without resorting to this. I guess finally then, I don't think signage is our core business.
Right.
And teaching and learning is.
Sure.
We move forward with this.
No argument.
If we have a battle, we're going to have a lot to deal with. Spending more time and money than this deserves is bad for our students. So that's my recommendation to you. This is not something we discuss in private.
No.
It's got to be discussed publicly. And I'm expecting you tonight to say, okay, we don't like it either, but go ahead and do it, or No, the majority of us want us to do something different, and I will do that because I work for you. That's my,
I'd just like to say something real quickly, and I hope the village council is listening to this tonight, because I'm really disappointed in them. We have been talking about this for, excuse me, Ed, how many years?
Mm-hmm. 6, 8 years.
At least. And I'll tell you, not to work with us on this situation is unconscionable. And I'll tell you, I hope every single one of the people that live in this village realize that and vote accordingly. Because I'll tell you, this is just a travesty to fight with us over a digital sign. This is the 21st century. Good grief. To be honest with you, every gas station in town should have a digital sign.
I agree.
I'll tell you. You know what? And this is infuriating to me. And I know it's not good for our kids or anything, but it's good for our schools. And honestly, they need to get with the program. I am just appalled. I'm sorry. I don't mean to get angry, but this is just ridiculous.
One of the things that needs to be talked about in open forum is what has our good faith negotiations brought? What has that process been like? I think the public needs to know the discussions that you've had with the mayor, with the village manager. Why are we at this point? Because my understanding is I thought we were going for a text amendment for a digital sign. Is that now
Correct.
completely off the table? And if it is, why?
well, it's not completely off the table, but I don't think we'll be successful.
And why is that?
My communications with the village manager,
The votes aren't there.
Well,
And
I'm
Nancy's?
going to step in.
I have impressions too.
I'm going to step in.
Mine too.
Because I think that, Mark is in a position because he works with people from a day-to-day basis. Mark and I met with Mr. Fielding and Mayor Tully. I walked out of that meeting thinking that we were going to go forward with the text amendment, that we were going to be, if you will, the test case for using digital signs in a select type of organization within Downers Grove. We tried to, and that's what I walked out believing. We had some follow-up conversations. We had some discussions with Mr. Fielding. He said, because the village has also, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the village has also changed its process where now to get a text amendment, you take the issue in front of the village council to determine whether or not you should even go forward for a text amendment. And then if you should, you do. But we were told very, very succinctly that the village, that some discussions had been happening behind the scenes, and that the village council was not going to go forward with this. Mayor Tully, Mr. Fielding responded to my emails after 2 attempts and a phone call. Mayor Tully never responded to my email. And I think there was one other point I wanted to make about this. What was it?
That they're liars.
That wasn't it. But essentially, that's what happened from my perspective. And we are put in this situation where there's been a lot of time spent on this. I think we've been led through. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. I think that either we were simply misled initially, or things just changed, and I don't know which. I did invite Mr. Fielding to address this today, but he did not feel that he could come as a representative of the village, because he does not know what will happen either. It is only what he thinks might be predictions.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the village manager is not, works for the village council. He is not a voting member of the village council.
That's correct.
Right.
I think option number 4 would be to go ahead and go with a text amendment. And to kind of piggyback on what Ms. Pavicic said, we need to get with the 21st century, and so does this community, Woodridge, Downers Grove, Lisle, Darien, et cetera, and not worry about the 19th century, worried about chicken coop ordinances. in my opinion. So I think option number 4 is something that I would be in favor of. I think that's cost effective, but it puts the village on notice, number 1. Number 2, it puts the community on notice that, they have an action to take. Number 3, it allows for a vote to be taken. I want to know that we're going to be denied and not just talk that it's not going to go through. I want them on record before we move forward.
And which one votes yes and no. I think that's important, too. I agree with you, Keith, 100%.
Well, do recall, I will say this, do remember that with any text amendment, although actually with this new process as it's described to me, it actually sounds like you don't have to incur the legal costs associated with the tax amendment. You simply float the idea by, and if it gains traction, then okay, then you go ahead with legal fees. So to your point, I think that's good. I will tell you this, living in Woodridge, our high school does have a digital sign.
What?
Your
Bridge, the point was our school, well, not all of our schools, but our high school has a digital sign.
There isn't a
Middle school, excuse me.
Middle school.
No, Woodridge High School, I'm sorry, our middle school has a digital sign.
We're trying to help you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Just say which high school is that?
It's the one a lot of people have been asking for in Downtown.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to maybe frame this a little bit. First, the fact that if we were to move forward with something, that it would create bad relations, I think that would be the village's choice, really not ours. In fact, I think that our effort all along here is, number one, maybe just to back up just a little bit more. I think that, first of all, that the school code does say that we don't go to to be clear to everybody, we don't go to the village and ask them, for permission to build an addition on our school. I mean, these are things that are governed by state school code, and there is a process and approvals we have to go through to make sure we're complying with ordinances or with codes and regulations. But the Village of Downers Grove isn't that overseeing authority with what we do here.
That's correct.
And so, to say that the signs are the one thing on our grounds that somehow are outside of that, I don't think that that's true. I believe that we have every authority to do the right thing, all right, and that is to put up whatever sign we feel is right within means. I think we've been making going over the top here in terms of arranging meetings with the village to say, hey, listen, we believe we have this authority. However, we're members of this community, and we recognize that what we like to do isn't something that your ordinance would normally allow us to do. And so, can't we come up with some sort of compromise? And isn't there some way to work through this? The information we're getting back is that for whatever reason, at least casual conversations occurring behind closed doors and whatever, is that there isn't a willingness to work with us on this. And so, to be clear, this, if whatever we do, it's not a result of us not wanting to work with others. And in fact, if we were to move forward with something and the village would choose to challenge it, I got to ask why. Why would the village want to waste taxpayer money in a challenge to us over a sign that is a perfectly reasonable thing to do when every school in the country, for instance, every school in the country, for instance, would do this sort of thing.
If I could respond a little bit, Mike, there's a couple of things you've said that
okay, I'll
make
stop
sure
here.
I clarify. The village is, I've never heard them say we don't want to work with the district.
I didn't say that.
They said the opposite.
Okay.
The issue is not. The issue is not whether they want to work with the district about its signage. The issue is they don't want to have digital signage in Downers Grove.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
That's what that would be the issue that they have an issue with. They do not want to have in any form digital signage in Downers Grove.
Some people don't like pink houses either.
I understand. I just want to make clear. Also, you and I have talked about this for months. We have, again, talked to legal counsel. There are different rulings out there.
Right.
That's really.
And some of the, I think, Attorney General's opinion would not be in our favor. But, you know, I would
But
say
there are
that's-
others that would?
Pardon me?
There are instances where it would, though.
Well, our attorneys think they could, but it's not a slam dunk.
Well, I understand that.
My point, my job is to tell you what the options are. I believe, you know, we could, it's always been an option to do that. The risks are, I would presume if the village is that adamantly opposed to digital signage, they would be obligated then, or obligated is.
They've drawn the
Your
line in
choice.
the sand, so to speak.
They would have to philosophically oppose us legally if we install the signs. That's my premise.
Where I was going was that that's really a choice that they make, though. I mean, because they could recognize our authority if they wanted to, as they do with anything else that we do on our grounds. And so, you know, my inclination in terms of trying to move this thing along, I think that it makes good sense to try to come up with a scheme here for South as a starting point. All right, as a starting point, and let them know, here's exactly where we're going to put it. Here's exactly what we've decided we'd like to do. One last chance. Would you like to have any input in that, or are you just going to continue to draw that line in the sand? Because can't we be that test case? Can't we? I mean, this was an ordinance that they wrote several years ago. Very good motivation behind it, and I think it's been actually very successful. I mean, you look at Ogden Avenue and you look at what's happening in town. Huge improvement. I mean, so kudos there. But now is 7, 8 years later, and there's been a lot of developments in technology since then, and there's time to look at the positives and negatives to what you did. What you put in place 7 years ago was a reaction to a bad situation, which I think was very good. But hey, can't you take a look at and be a little, in certain situations? I don't think we're establishing a precedent here where all the businesses in town are going to come running and screaming, I got to have a digital sign now.
I think that's their fear, though.
But it's not right. But I understand. This is a school and the purpose that we have here in terms of the communication, the emergency element, the safety issue, the fact that we had a sign that got torn down and we have to build a new sign anyhow. I mean, if we were to put that sign up in a location that at least from a location standpoint complies, maybe from a size standpoint is in compliance or close to in compliance, and we've got a couple lines of digital text there so that we can notify the community when there's something going on here, and especially in an emergency situation, that could be beneficial. So I think we've got good cause to try to move forward with something here at South. The one at North, I just can't. I can't see us. If we're not going to do a digital sign there, I certainly don't want to rebuild the one we've got. I mean, and where else would we put it, for heaven's sakes? And so I'm wondering how they make that possible for us. I don't know, but really, once again, I really shouldn't need their permission on that. Why not just leave it alone and recognize our authority to have that sign there as it is? And what harm is it doing? Hard to believe that that's an issue.
So, Mike, I got a little lost. Is it your suggestion that we take the road of submitting a request for text amendment to be reviewed, outlining a digital sign at South and
yes,
keeping North the same.
Yes, I think
keeping North the same at
keeping
least.
in the spirit of what Keith was proposing. I think that's a great way to put that together, Nancy.
It's a good starting point.
Then I'm misunderstanding. I understood Keith is recommending we pursue the text amendment.
Yeah.
Well, I understand what you're saying is we build a sign, we don't really need the text amendment because we are not beholden to the village ordinances for our own campus.
Great point. What I think makes sense though is for us to say we'd like for what we're doing to not only be under the regulations of what we're doing that be acceptable, but school code, but also to be something that you would find acceptable as well. And the text amendment would give them that opportunity to do that or to say no. And in which case, you know, we can make a decision then.
Right.
Or maybe through that process, there's some compromise that comes out of it. I'm all for, listen, I do not want to get in a situation where we risk, you know, a fight.
Yeah.
That's
we
too
don't-
much money.
We don't want that.
The lawyers are going to
But
get
I
rich.
would like some sort of a formal response instead of all of this. I mean, we sent in good faith Dr. McDonald and Nancy Kupka to talk, you know, with them, their representatives, with our representatives, and we came away with one feeling from both of you, which was relayed to the rest of the board, and then all of a sudden, where it just changed. And that's unacceptable because, as you were saying, Dr. Kupka, that you feel like there has been some talk behind closed doors where, you know, we don't have access to that. And we're not saying it happened, but there is that feeling. I would like to have an actual formal response back from the village on where we stand with that before we move forward. I want them to acknowledge what we're doing and to have a response to us so that way that is presented in the public eye and we are very transparent. I want the public to know that we, in good faith, have gone to them and that this is the response they're giving. And then we can actually either you know, go forward with the community support, or you know, if we get some feedback that the community does not support what we're doing, and they would you know agree if that's the response that the village comes back with, that no, they don't support us. If the community supports that, then I would understand that, because after all, we are elected officials. We would like to do what the community supports, but I want to wait for that official response.
Well, and to your point, you know, I think we've been a little bit under disadvantaged, advantaged, I'm not sure. Well, a lot of people here we all live in the community, and so people have conversations and they walk away with certain beliefs and understandings, and then, you know, somebody else walks away with another belief and understanding. So let's put it on the table.
But it's all hearsay.
What's the mystery?
It's all
Exactly,
hearsay.
it's all hearsay to
It's
them.
all hearsay. We need to present, we need a response.
But I also think that we should have some sort of I'm not going to say a time limit specifically, but they can't keep dragging it on for 6 months down the road. We've been 3 years without a sign. We need to let them make a decision and make it relatively quickly. And I don't know, you know, and I don't think that's too much to ask. I don't think we're being out, you know.
Well, if we go the text amendment route, I do not anticipate that happening quickly. I base that on our experience with the fence years ago. It took several months for the text amendment.
And attorney's fees.
So there's no way for them to get it on the agenda?
But one governmental body to
If I,
But we don't have to go, excuse me for interrupting, but we don't have to do a full text amendment.
I was
We
just
can
going to
do
ask
the
about that informal thing you were talking about.
It's not an informal thing, it's a
Okay.
formal thing.
All right.
It's a request for consideration for text amendment, that's
but
probably
I
not
don't
the
know
right
if
word.
I don't know if that is their policy yet. As I
Oh,
recall,
that's true.
I
It's
was,
becoming their
we were
policy.
told that's going to happen. I don't know if it's happened yet.
In our lifetime.
Or when it's going to happen.
We did submit back in 2007 or 8, I think 2008, we did pursue a text amendment. And it made it through the, not the Plan Commission.
like the zoning.
Zoning Board of Appeals.
Zoning Board of
Board of
Appeals,
Appeals,
but it was not supported by the village council. So I presume then, if we go through the same process, we'll get the same result. If we wait until there's a new zoning ordinance and there's a new procedure, we may or may not get the opportunity to write a text amendment. And even if we do, we're talking several months, and unless something, it's my perception or impression that the village council is not likely to support a text amendment in any case. So if we go for a text amendment, my presumption would be that we're doing it to make the issue public, but not necessarily are we going to be successful.
Well,
I mean, and it's going to take a long time. it's not going to be something that'll happen by June.
And it's not cheap.
On that.
And what do we do about
That's a
a
problem,
sign?
because we need to get this
Sorry.
done.
But Julia actually had a.
I was just going to ask, what do we do about a sign in the meantime? We're waiting another 6 months and we still don't have a sign at South.
Right.
It's very upsetting to me, too. Here it is, it's the emergency center, and we can't even tell people that that's what it is. I mean, I think people have forgotten we ever did have a sign at South, probably. So I'm wondering, is there anything we can do? I really like the idea of their being public about how they feel about this. But is there any sort of interim thing we could do at South to get some kind of a sign up while this months-long process is going on?
I don't know. I'm not sure a temporary sign is
I know,
the right
that's-
way to go either, because
Yeah.
I think that that's just showing that, we'll do
making a
whatever we
point.
have to do.
It's making a point.
Well, unless maybe we can get our students to wear, what is it?
Yeah, sandwich boards?
Sandwich
Okay.
boards.
Mike, I think you had the
Because that looks like the era that they want.
I think you had the next comment.
Well, I think if it's going to take several months, I just don't, we've already we've been talking about this for several
This
months.
is so
and
frustrating.
Part of this, I feel like, in a way, it's, the longer this goes on, it becomes like another chicken coop issue or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Home to roost.
I like to see this resolved. And so my inclination then, if it's true that this is something that's going to take a long time, I think we have the authority. I think it's not in the Village of Downers Grove's best interest to challenge this legally and waste taxpayer money, and that we need a sign at South. We've been without one ever since the tornado, which was 3 years ago now.
3 years,
And the reason we haven't put it back is because of
We've been trying
for 3 years trying to figure out how best to go about this, and here we are still. And we need to get this work done in the summer. We need to stop spending time on this. So I think that there's probably a way to build the sign at South such that if we do it so that it's in the right location, if we do it so that if in a way we were to get, just like the north sign is set up to be digital in the event that we could do it,
No.
the south sign can be, we go ahead and put the digital in, and if the village chose to, fight us on it and whatever, and we could certainly retrofit it to take it out if we lost, but we wouldn't have to throw the whole sign away, which was a concern, right? So there's probably a way to go about your option 2 here. Go forward with that tonight, and then be careful in terms of our planning about where it's placed, how big it is, and what the options are, the adaptability, as we were talking earlier tonight about our facilities, make sure that it's something that's adaptable so that we're covering our bases in the case that the village decides to waste taxpayer money and challenging our authority to do this. Then we've got a way to either decide, okay, we'll back off and comply, or we'll decide that we're in the right and we haven't done anything wrong. And that's for me, that's what it is. I'm an architect. I look at codes and ordinances for a living. I advise my clients on how best to comply with things. And as I look at this, this wouldn't have been something that I would have said to my client, you need to talk to your attorney to make sure that this is okay. To me, it is pretty cut and dry. And the fact that there's already something in the ordinance right now, the village's ordinance, that says that we don't even need their permission to put up a sign, that I think that we're just perfectly in the right going ahead. And I feel good about that decision, and I'd like to get it done. And I think doing it at South right now, it makes perfect sense. We have a sign at North, we leave it alone for now. And we don't ask for their permission to leave it alone for now.
I think if we go down that route, the only question that I would ask is what authority has designated South a shelter? Like under what auspice, under what guidance have they determined that? Is it a county,
government
state?
agency?
Because what I'm getting at is if we can get Department of Homeland Security to say we have this such and such designation, that's a federal type of mandate that overrides and supersedes anything the village may or may not
That's a
want
good
to do.
point, Keith. I'm not sure who designated, who is
I think it was.
governing
Designate.
authority. It very well could be Department of Homeland Security. I'm just
Thinking
not
back to
sure.
those old,
Yeah.
pardon me for being a history teacher, but the old duck and cover in civil defense, every structure was labeled by the government with those triangles, the
Yep.
gold triangles with the
South High was.
with the circle in it that said CD, civil
Right,
civil
civil
defense. I think this is very similar. I think it's a modern adaptation of civil defense. If that's the case, I mean, we've been talking about this again for a long time, but there is a governmental purpose. There is an overriding purpose. It's not, hey, let's have more beautifully aesthetic-looking things. There is an overriding principle, an
Yes.
overriding purpose. This is number one. Those other things are secondary.
It would be a shelter.
Yeah.
We're
and
very
ours
kind
is
of
a-
I would
a
also,
shelter.
I would also advocate that as we move forward with this option too, that, that we continue to inform the village about what we're doing and ask for their input in the process. I mean, I think that makes great sense. I mean, and I, certainly if there's something about what we're doing that, gee, if we just made it a little bit smaller or we reduced something about it or moved it a little bit and that made it more palatable, I'm interested in that. But I'm not interested in a line in the sand and that's it. And I think we have the authority to move forward. I would move that we move forward the second option that's been presented this evening from Dr. McDonald.
I'll second that.
I think
Do we
it's
have
an action item.
Yeah, it's not an action item, but do we
No,
have
it's
other
just a consensus.
discussion that,
Don't I have the right to make a motion?
It's all business.
If it wasn't listed as an actionable item, we can't make a motion and.
Right.
Or do you just want consensus?
Yeah, I think that's right.
I need to know what the majority want to do, and I'm going to do it. That's what I
Okay.
need. It doesn't need to be a vote, but obviously we're in a public forum, we're on television. Everyone's going to know. It's as a matter of protocol whether it's a action item or not.
Okay, well, I'll retract my motion if you agree to back up, and we'll go around and do it just a voice consensus?
I think they need to know who's for and who's against and that, I'll retract it, but I think we need to
Right,
go around
we'll
the
go around.
table and everybody commit to one thing.
well, wait, do we have other discussion before we go around the table?
I'm confused what Mike proposed.
The second option? Is that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but how much money does he plan on spending before this becomes a legal case between the two? Does he want to build it and see if they come? Or does he want to start a foundation and then say, hey, we're putting it here, and then see if they just say we're going to have to fight this in court? Or do you want the court battle right out of the gate? You're going to put the sign up, turn it on, and say, come after us. I don't know how much you want to build before you start.
Well, I don't think it's going to take that long to build it. It's going to be probably 2 months, right?
No, it'll be faster than that. It won't take very long at all.
Okay.
As much as you regret hearing option number 3, if this goes to court and if it gets ruled against us, we're going to be out quite a bit of money, a lot of money, and it's going to be lawyers' fees. And I don't think the village is going to vote through a text amendment on digital signage. Maybe you have to take this up with them in the next election.
I'm not asking for their permission, though.
See, well, then I cannot support that decision. I can't. If you're going to go full nose, bull nose in the China shop ahead and build it, I can't, no.
You're concerned about the cost?
I'm concerned about the cost of the taxpayer of legal fees down the road. You put in a $54,000 sign and you have to take it out.
Did you hear what I said, though? I mean, I don't know, maybe you said you were confused, so.
You said you wanted to start building it.
I said that I want to propose to the village what we're doing and let them be a part of that process if they choose to.
That's through a text amendment then, right?
No.
No, I think that's, I
No. Good neighbor.
interpret that, Rick, as we let the village know this is where we're going to go.
Before we go.
Yes.
Invite them.
I can do that.
Invite them
Before we
to
go.
participate.
Right.
If they wish to.
Because I took it, you wanted to build it and see if they come.
What I was saying is that, I'm just trying to outline steps. We all the way along ask for their input into the process. I would love it if they would, we make some tweaks to what we've designed and they can live with that. Like I said, maybe it's only, instead of the whole thing being this digital sign like we saw in that presentation that night.
We might be able to
it
tone
might be
that
some-
down
Right, it might be
to
something that's
3
much
lines
less.
instead of 4.
Right. If that's, I'd like to hear that, and then, because I don't want them to make the legal challenge. They certainly don't. Listen, they're good stewards too, okay? I know some of them personally. These are good people, all right? So I have a hard time believing that they'd do something vindictively or out of spite or just to draw a line in the sand and whatever. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
But
that way.
didn't
So
Mark
what
and
I'm-
Nancy ask them?
They did. But what I'm saying is that we give them the opportunity along the way, and even if they choose not to, there's a way to build the sign such that we're not wasting $54,000. I'm concerned about that too.
And the
So-
lawyers'
so when-
fees.
So when we can choose either, at that point, if they choose to go forward with that, okay, then we have a decision to make on our hands. Do we oppose it, or do we then go ahead and retrofit the sign by pulling the digital element out of it and putting basically what you see at North? So what I'm saying is that there's a way to shelter us from some of this. If we do this, asking for their input, possibly there's some sort of gentleman's agreement, so to speak, that, yeah, they actually will recognize our authority and they can live with this thing. If, in the end, they don't, and we push forward anyhow, we do it in a way that is adaptable so that we can cut our losses. If we end up spending some money on a digital element of the sign, then yes, that portion of it we would lose. But now we're reducing our losses to such extent that I think it's probably worth doing.
But I guess, how are we going to ask them? Because we've already asked them nicely, courtly, said, let's have a meeting, let's discuss this.
I believe we did discuss.
And you did, I'm sure that's what you discussed, right?
Interpretation is that we.
So how are we going to ask them again
Install a sign
without doing a
their
text
permission.
amendment?
That's
Because
what
we've never-
Mark just said. We go
Yeah.
ahead and tell them we are going to do it, but we ask for their input. I also would really like to investigate further who gave us the authority to be the emergency center.
Yes.
I think it's very important that we push that. That's my huge concern.
Right.
All this time, we've been kind of lucky. We haven't had a
Right.
major thing. Several years ago, we did. We had that chemical spill at South. But anyway, I really think we should inform ourselves as to how that worked and what it means. And if it is really a Homeland Security thing, that trumps everything as far as I'm concerned. And maybe we do that, and then we go to the village and say, hey, really, we've researched this. This is really important.
Sure.
This is a big deal.
Now it becomes bigger.
So just to summarize, we need to, more information about how we became a designated safety site. We will compose a letter that will go to the village board saying, this is what we'd like to do.
Given that information.
Given this information, this is what we would like to do. We understand that there are codes that surround this issue. We would like some sort of formal feedback, because
Right.
we don't want to keep having
Right.
background conversations.
Right.
No, we want
Not
it
working,
public.
yeah.
We have some sort of formal communication back about the village's feelings, and then we'll make our decision about which way to go. Is that a fair summation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that what we need? Okay.
Good discussion.
Very good discussion. Policy Committee report, first reading.
Oh, gosh, we still.
Interest of time.
Is there anything, can we just get back to you with whatever?
Please get
Yes.
back to us if you have any comments about these policies that are listed in the agenda this evening. We've met, we've discussed them, and
We're meeting again on June 5th.
that's right.
Okay.
My wedding anniversary.
You guys, the fun never stops for you.
It's slowing down, though.
It is. You're
There's-
almost
yeah,
there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Reception of visitors. This is the second reception of visitors.
Snoring.
Wake up. Come on, Ed. Wake up.
Is there anyone who would like to approach the board on any subject? Given none, we had a few people who said in the interest of time, they had nothing really
I can
substantive.
hold my report.
So
Had
Julia
nothing.
withholds. Lend?
Our upcoming meeting has been moved to the first week in June, but superintendent is giving us updates as it becomes available based on budgetary issues that are now being discussed in Springfield, so please keep an eye on that, and we'll move forward at that time.
And let me just thank you for your updates. Those are extremely helpful.
They are they're really helpful.
Julia, you're passing on an update for SACID and
That's right.
Illinois
I'll give you
Humanities.
totally detailed reports next time.
Terry, you're passing on the
On the
foundation.
foundation, that's fine.
IASB?
I have nothing at this time.
Okay. I just lost my place on my
Parking lot.
Parking lot.
parking lot. Does
Yep.
not, does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up or add to at this moment in time? Okay, upcoming board meetings. June 6th, Graduation.
Woohoo.
Best seat in the house. And June 16th is our business meeting at 7:30.
I move that we adjourn.
And
I'll second that.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you.